It's chilly in here, please.
It does.
Maybe.
No. I wish I had my
Okay.
jacket.
Are we ready to go? Let's see if I can figure out what I just did. Well, anyway, I'll figure it out as we go. So, first thing we have to do is to come out of closed meeting. Is there somebody want to read the closed meeting certification motion?
I lost it. Here we go. I move that the city council member certify by recorded vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Thomas, would you take the vote, please?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. We are now back in order. Having established that we have a quorum, let's begin the business meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you. There are a lot of things that are weighing on a lot of our minds at the moment. Councilors, are there any announcements?
Mr. Mayor, there's kind of a statement to make concerning the recent shootings and tragic events that's taken place since we've last met. It's been something that's really has been, on my heart for the past several weeks. I've been praying for peace. I've been praying for the families of those impacted. My heart particularly goes out to my former school board colleagues in Uvalde, Texas. As school board members, our first priority is provide a safe environment to learn, for the students to learn, and I just can only imagine what that community is going through now. And I will continue to pray and support initiatives that to see that this doesn't happen again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Others?
I haven't really had words for this. The amount of mass shootings our country has seen since January is astounding. And the fact that we have had insults at our own middle school, in the bathrooms, racial slurs and threats to our children is not something that I ever want to see in this community. I don't want to see it in this country. And yes, I know it's here. And I know when we had the opportunity, we restricted guns as much as we could, and we're going to continue working towards that where we can. At least I will. This is just, it's got to stop.
Other councilors wish to add anything? I'll just say that let's just sort of skip ahead and kind of smush this into the next thing on the agenda, which was to be the resolution on Gun Violence Awareness Month. Gun Violence Awareness Day was June 3rd, 2020. Gun Violence Awareness Month is the month of June at the moment. And I did a resolution which, when I do these mayoral proclamations, it is not just Lloyd Snook opining. It is usually the product of a lot of discussion and drafts that have been circulated among other councilors. And this is a draft that I wanted to make sure that other councilors felt comfortable with. And so I circulated, and we made some edits to take those suggestions. I'll summarize it basically, but it starts off, whereas in 2020, more than 45,000 Americans were killed by firearms, including about 26,000 by suicide and more than 19,000 by homicide, an average of about 70 gun suicides a day and 50 gun homicides a day. And whereas, as I wrote this just last week, hardly a week goes by in this country without news of another mass shooting, whether in a church, a synagogue, a grocery store, or an elementary school. This week we could say hardly a day goes by. And in recent years, Virginia has had more than 1,000 gun deaths and more than 330 gun homicides annually, or about 1 gun homicide a day in Virginia. And whereas localities across the nation, including Charlottesville, are working to end the senseless violence with evidence-based solutions, and so on, we go on down to renewing a commitment to reduce gun violence. We pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands, to encourage responsible gun ownership, to help keep our children safe. And so, now therefore be it resolved, we declare that we as a city must do more to reduce gun violence. We encourage all Charlottesville citizens to advocate for meaningful legislation at the state and federal levels to stop mass shootings and gun violence, to support our local efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence, and to honor and value human lives. This, at some level, feels a little bit like a thoughts and prayers kind of a resolution, because there's nothing in specific that we're saying, I, Lloyd Snook, am going to go do this in particular. Partly because, for political reasons, it's easy for us to say, well, these are state and federal problems. And certainly the regulation, the law dealing with guns is not a local problem. We don't have the power to do that. But there are a lot of things I think that we can work on. A lot of gun violence, or violence prevention in general. And violence prevention is not only, it is partly, but it is not only the work of groups like the Buck Squad, like Peace in the Streets. I think there are a lot of other things that we should be thinking about in terms of violence prevention efforts. And what I think that, without getting terribly specific at this point, because I don't have an agenda, 4-point plan or anything like that, just offer my commitment to do what I can, where I can, for as long as I can. I think that that's all that any of us can do. And I think that we all need to reaffirm that commitment to make that effort and to figure out what the answer is, because thoughts and prayers all by themselves are not solving any problems. Our kids continue to die. Our adults continue to die, and it's unacceptable. So that's my little soapbox. I want to say that, and this is not directly related to it, but it's close. I really enjoyed yesterday going to the Tonsler Basketball League tip-off. And thanks to Wes Bellamy for organizing that, and also for organizing the bike giveaway. I particularly, though, enjoyed his T-shirt. It said, "Blame Wes." And I thought, any one of us could have a T-shirt like that saying, "You blame fill in the blank," because we get a lot of pot shots taken at us for a lot of reasons, and some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad, but we still get a lot of blame. But the important thing for Wes, I think, we need to acknowledge that despite all of the difficulties that I'm sure he was dealing with, He persevered, he pushed through, he got the league off to a good start, he got the bike giveaway going. It was a wonderful event. So, to, you know, as Wes would say, much love to Wes. Any additional items for recognition?
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, the event we went to on Friday night, held over at Mount Zion African Church by the Buck Squad and by others, I guess Moms Against Gun Violence. It was a very good event. Yeah, I guess the thing that I came away from that in particular was meeting with some of the members of the Buck Squad and the work that they do in those neighborhoods, and wanting myself to learn more, to know more, and to consider how we can support that work going forward, because the prevention that they're doing in terms of meeting with people that have disagreements, that get mad at each other, angry at each other on social media, and then take it out with weapons. They're in the middle of those sorts of conversations and preventing bad things from happening. And so I was really impressed with them, and I was impressed by the event. Grateful for them for putting all that on.
Yeah. Any other comments at this point? Okay, and so we'll move on. No additional items for recognition? Time for the consent agenda. Ms. Thomas, would you read us the consent agenda, please?
Consent agenda number 3, resolution appropriating supplemental funding received from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development for HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for People with AIDS, HIV, $10,098, second reading. 4, resolution appropriating anticipated supplemental grant funding from the Virginia Housing Solutions Program to be used for contracted services, $141,000, second reading. 5, resolution appropriating funding received from the United Way as reimbursement of community resource hotline staff costs, $35,311.50, second reading. 6, resolution community development block grant funding and FY 2022 through 2023 annual action plan. A, resolution appropriating community development block grant funds received from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the FY 2022 through 2023 action plan, $433,471, second reading. B, resolution appropriating home investment partnership program funds received from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for FY 2022 through 2023, $84,576.88, second reading. C, resolution approving the FY 2022 through 2023 annual action plan for the City of Charlottesville CDBG home programs, second reading. 7, resolution approving the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority Northern Area Projects Allocation Agreement, one reading. 8, by motion, pursuant to the continuity of governance ordinance, authorization for regular meetings of the Planning Commission and Board of Architectural Review to be held in hybrid format, one reading. 9, resolution amending the contract for city manager services with the Robert Bob Group to extend the contract through December 31st, 2022, one reading. 10, resolution appropriating the amount of $15,000 to be expended for the local emergency management performance grant, first of 2 readings.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. We will now take public comment regarding items on the consent agenda that were just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. In the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. If you've joined us by phone, wish to speak on the consent agenda, press star 9. We will alternate in-person and virtual speakers. Is there anyone in council chambers who would like to speak on one of the consent agenda items? Seeing no one, do we have anybody virtually who would like to speak to us on one of the consent agenda items?
Mayor Snook, I see 2 hands raised.
Okay, we can just barely hear you. I hope that we will hear them better.
I have 2 hands raised.
Okay.
Our first speaker is Robin Hoffman. Robin, you are on with council.
I just want to remark that the consent agenda, and then I want to go into the public speaking, but I think we're not prioritizing what we need to do for our schools right now. The kids are scared to death, and they've been scared to death before the pandemic, and now it's increasingly, they can't even get on a bus. I mean, there are so many things in this city right now that should be prioritizing the safety of our citizens. And I think that we need to, how do you say, show some leadership. We had a chief operating officer who was able to stop people from bringing guns into the city on August 12th, 2018 by just making an ordinance that day, that minute. And I'm sure we can do the same for our city and our county. I don't think we need to do anything else right now. And that's what I think should be our priority, is to eliminate the guns, the military-style weapons, period. And we have to look at the post office and FedEx, and we have to look at all the ways that these guns are getting here and the ammunition, and just stop it. Just like every city is beginning to realize that they have to eliminate the military-style weapons, and that's it. If you carry one, you have to report it to the FBI, or you have to report it to your local police, and you have to lock it up. And for sure, you're not allowed to use it. If you're seen using it, you can be arrested and put in jail for life. And that's what we need to talk about in terms of an agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. And I will note that was not relevant to the consent agenda, but I figured it'd be easier. We don't seem to have a lot of competition for these spots at this point, so I'm not going to worry about it too much, but I hope that the next comment will be related specifically to the consent agenda. Who is the other speaker? Did you have one for us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, I see that John Hall is set to speak as well. He might also be ready to speak during regular public comment.
Mr. Hall, you are listed as the first speaker during regular public comment, so this is not actually the time designated for you. Could you wait for us, please?
He appears to still be muted on his end.
Okay, well, why don't we, I'm going to assume that what he wants to talk about.
Who's the other speaker? Did you have one for us?
Yes, Mayor Snook, I see that John Hall is set to speak as well. He might also be
He just unmuted himself.
comments.
Mr. Hall, you are listed as the first speaker during regular public comment, so this is not actually the time designated for you. Could you wait for us, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how that happened, that I got replayed that way, but we accomplished the result. Is there anybody else wanting to speak on the consent agenda?
I see no additional hands.
So let me mention, we got a question from Dee Dee Smith that came just a few minutes ago, asking about why the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority Northern Area Projects Allocation Agreement provides that the city is splitting the costs of decommissioning the North Fork Rivanna Water Treatment Plant that serves exclusively the northern sector of Albemarle County. New water projects up there are being paid 100% by the county, and I think the question is, why are we having to pay some portion of the decommissioning of that plant? I see Ms. Hildebrand, maybe, are you able to shed some light on that for us?
So during the discussions when we were trying to decide about payment, it was decided that we should pay our fair share to decommission that plant. Since we have, over the last 30, 50 years, we have paid to keep the plant in operation. It serves a vital role as far as redundancy to the system, to the urban system.
So the plant that was there, we paid our share to build in the first place?
I don't believe we paid to build our share. think initially when it was built in the 60s, it was actually built by the Service Authority or Albemarle County probably at the time.
I see.
But over the last 50 or so years, we have paid our fair shares in the operations and maintenance of the plant.
Okay. Do you know how much the decommissioning is going to cost?
I think it's around $2 million.
So 48% would be roughly $1 million.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay. And that, I take it, has been the subject of a fair amount of negotiation between city and county and the folks in the RWSA.
That's correct. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions about anything on the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Thomas, you take the vote?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0 to adopt the consent agenda. Next item is the update from the city manager's office. Mr. Rogers, would you like to present a report to us?
Yes, sir. You have a written report before you with a number of items. I'll just highlight a couple of items myself and then have Sam and Ashley highlight some areas from their section. At the last council meeting, an issue was raised about an incident at Buford School where the cameras did not work and did not capture an incident. The cameras at the schools are operated and maintained by the school system. In conversation with Superintendent Gurley, the camera in question is operational and captured the incident and is being handled appropriately at this time. No further comment on that, but I just wanted to get back to you as promised that we followed up on that.
Okay.
At the invitation of the Executive Director of the Charlottesville Chamber of Commerce, the City Manager spoke at the Chamber Board retreat. The message focused on needed collaboration between the business community and the city government to move the city forward. I visited also the Public Housing Resident Association, FAR, to learn more about the operation and programs and met with Shelby Edwards, the Executive Director. I attended also the Charlottesville Airport Authority Board meeting, representing the city on that board, and for the approval of the budget. Also attended the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority Solid Waste and the Solid Waste Authority Board. Met with the Executive Director of the United Way and the Executive Director of the Charlottesville Convention and Visitors Association. Bureau, rather, and attended the Charlottesville Business Innovation Council awards gala last week. I also presented with pleasure certificates of completion to 15 supervisors who participated in the Supervisors Leadership Development Program sponsored by the Department of Human Resources, and a big shout out to them for an excellent program. Deputy City Manager Sam Sanders and I have been focused on working with Director James Frias on a variety of issues in neighborhood development services. We are experiencing critical manpower issues and regret the current pause on processing permits and inspections. We have made multiple offers to a new building official and have to restart the process again, with the most recent candidate changing their mind about relocating here at the last minute after we thought they accepted the position. We had previously contracted with the firm to help us with the inspections to offset our shortage. The 2 employees assigned by that firm also left us recently, so we are scrambling to catch up. The way of getting out of this situation is our constant discussion, and we're looking to reach out to the industry council and collaborate and see how they can come in and assist us. Employees are working as much as they can, as fast as they can, but this is an area that is kind of overwhelming us, but it has our full attention. We do have in the FY23 budget a new building inspector position that was created to help expand the capacity in advance of the new electronic permitting system, which goes live the spring of 2023. But we have to focus on re-engineering our system before we computerize the system. We just can't computerize the same broken procedures and processes that we have. So we're going to be working on that. We have completed the negotiations for the contract for collective bargaining. An award would be made in the next day or so. We expect to have an ordinance coming to council in the September, October timeframe, hopefully completed by that time. We actually expect that we will submit a draft for your review in early one of the meetings in August, and that's our objective. Tomorrow, the city will be issuing bonds for $26 million to fund our capital program. Our bonds were rated by Moody's and SP at AAA, again, for the 41st time in the city's history. Hats off to the finance department for continuing doing a great job and making sure that our bonds are rated AAA. When I say finance department, I mean the finance cluster with the treasurer and the revenue, commissioner of revenue, and the budget office, working with Chris Cullinan and his staff. At this point, Sam, you have some issues that you would like to highlight?
Good evening, councilors, and to the members of the public. Just wanted to share a few specific updates from the written report. With regards to emergency management, staff is working with Launch Consulting to facilitate continuity of operations plan for the city. This is a long overdue process following the events of 2017 that we are finally being able to deliver on. The goal is to make sure that we are prepared for anything that may happen in the future. Secondary to that, staff is currently working with Charlottesville City Schools to participate in an upcoming summer safety workshop. As was mentioned previously, we know that the feelings on campus are a little challenged at the moment. We're working with staff and leadership there to make sure that we can put in the appropriate plans and to make sure that our response would be what the community would expect at large if something were to happen on any campus in the city. In the transit area, CAT has hired Kimley Horn as a consultant to complete the alternative fuel vehicle feasibility study. This is the study that Garland mentioned in his January presentation to council. This is to help look at the ability for us to convert our fleet and to lay out for us what the various improvements that would be necessary to support a conversion of the fleet from current fossil fuels to using more of an electric battery operated version of buses across our system. That plan will be coming out later in the year, and we look forward to them being able to take advantage of the infrastructure dollars that are coming as well to make it possible for us to convert that fleet in a timely fashion. NDS and traffic engineering staff is working to respond to the Safer Streets grant funds. It's to develop a comprehensive transportation safety plan for the city. This plan is required in order for us to access infrastructure dollars that are coming in that area. We wanted to make sure that that was known. We know that there were a few inquiries from members of the public who were aware of this funding source, and they wanted just to make sure that we were attuned to this opportunity. So I just want to make sure I shared that with everyone to know that we are on top of this and looking forward to submitting a proposal for that. The environmental sustainability team has been hard at work since their presentation to you council members in April. They have been working on Also having retained Kimley Horn to do an addendum to the contract that they are working on with CAT. This will be to examine climate and health implications of transitioning the current CAT fleet to an alternatively fuel fleet. It gives us the ability to also look at some of our peer city comparisons and helps us make sure that as we take our next steps forward, we're using as much information as available from those who have gone ahead of us. In addition, the environmental sustainability team is working on the climate vulnerability assessment, which began in fall 2021. They're actually hosting workshops on June 8th and 9th as the final engagement step before drafting the assessment report. The June 8th workshop is for city and government staff, and the June 9th workshop is for community members and organizations. It'll be held from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's a Zoom session, and its access is actually available on the climate vulnerability assessment page of our website. If there's any questions on that, you can call the city main office and we'll be able to get you the information to participate. That is the extent of my report.
Ashley, are there a couple of items that you would like to report?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the community. From our Department of Finance office, the Board of Equalization met on May 17th through 19th to hear appeals of the real estate assessment, and there were 11 appeals scheduled at that time. The city also successfully submitted its quarterly report to the U.S. Treasury for its use of American Rescue Plan funds as of March 31st. And by way of an update for the community on the utility disconnections for non-payment, as of today, actually, the utility billing office notified 282 accounts of pending disconnections by hanging cards on their doors. And to date, 246 of those accounts have made payment arrangements, which equals 47%. So utility billing is mostly up to date in its arrears. The Office of Equity and Inclusion will be hosting a virtual groundwater session later this month, and we're very proud to announce that it is full to the gills by individuals from our staff, our local libraries, and also we did invite our CRHA family and our United Way family to attend. We are considering hosting another event later in the summer so that there may be more opportunities for participation. And the office would also like to thank our facilities team for providing assistance in lighting City Hall green in remembrance of Mental Health Awareness Month last month, and currently lighting the building orange in honor of gun violence awareness. Our Department of Social Services wishes to make sure that eligibility for the Child Care Subsidy Program continues through June 30th, 2022. This expanded criteria includes relaxed income qualifying requirements up to 85% of AMI, a waiver of family co-payments for children, and use of child care subsidy during the job search period. Please contact the Department of Social Services at 434-970-3400 for additional information. Our Department of Human Services Community Connector Program serves residents of the City of Charlottesville and the County of Albemarle by working with residents and providing trauma-informed care to meet individuals where they are and connect them to resources based on their needs. The staff currently serves those who have housing choice vouchers, those who have an income, and/or those individuals who have criminal records over 5 years ago. Clients who are unhoused and experiencing homelessness are referred to the Homeless Information Helpline and other key nonprofit partners in our community, such as Pacham, The Haven, and Salvation Army. Further, seniors who need rental assistance and survivors of domestic violence are referred to the Alliance for Interfaith Ministries. In fiscal year 20, the program served 38 residents. In 21, they served 78. And in fiscal year 22, at the end of the third quarter, they had already served 60 residents. The residents served are 82% female, 18% male, and racially, 76% of the residents identify as African American, 20% white, non-Hispanic. And only 1% of the residents served have not reached successful completion of their care and support provided, while 84 of the residents were already successfully served. Finally, we would like to announce several key hirings. The hiring of Ms. Marianne Hardy as our Director of Human Resources, the promotion of Mr. David Dillahunt as the Deputy Director of Communications and Public Engagement, and the promotion of Ms. Misty Graves as the Director of Human Services. Several key hirings are in their final phases of completion, including the Director of Information Technology, the Public Safety Information Officer, and our Public Engagement Coordinator. We're beginning the first round of interviews shortly for the Director of Communications and Public Engagement, and we'd like to make sure that the community knows that they can go on our website to see all of our openings, and we encourage eligible applicants to apply. That's all I have for my report, sir.
Any questions, councilors?
No, thank you for that comprehensive report.
Very good.
I do have one question. This is not about anything that you all have talked about, but it was about something that you sent to us a couple days ago, and that's just sort of outlining where we are with outdoor pools for the summer. Is there anybody any city staff person who's on the call who can talk about that with us?
Sam, you have that one?
I can take a stab at it. I'm also looking to see if we have anyone from Parks and Rec, depending on the question. But go ahead with your question.
Well, there was a memo on May 19th that was sent to you from the Director of Parks and Rec that was talking about things. I get more questions in the last week or two about pools than anything else. And I just thought it would be nice to be able to put out the word. First of all, are the pools going to be open? Second, I've gotten a couple people saying, last year I made a donation to scholarships for pools for neighborhood kids. Can we do that again? And I just wanted to give somebody a bully pulpit here for a minute or two to talk about where we stand with pools.
Well, what I'll say on that, I don't want to go too far and say the wrong thing, but I'll just say that the staff has been working very hard to push to get all of our aquatic facilities open. That includes Smith, which has been closed for quite some time. Everything is open. Everything is working well. I rode around myself this weekend just to take a look and see that people were at the various pool facilities. We are experiencing a very critical shortage of lifeguards. We've been able to push through with a few incentive opportunities to be able to bring a few more people on, just as we were bringing the pools online. Those pools still continue to operate fully staffed at this moment. We're cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to get through the summer. We will continue to push for trying to expand our lifeguard pool, so we are definitely sounding the alarm to any and everyone who is interested in serving in that capacity with us. We will welcome you to join the team so that we can keep these facilities open. We, at this moment, don't think that there will be an issue being able to keep the pools open. We have already developed an alternative plan that if we were to find ourselves losing lifeguards because COVID is still a real situation for us, and we anticipate that there will be some manpower shortages from time to time, that if we were to experience the shortage, we would adjust versus closing. So we may cut back on the hours of operation to start with before we would actually shut down a facility. But at this time, we have not had to approach that. I just met briefly with the director this morning and asked the question about how was everything going with pools over this past weekend. And so far, all the reports are good to go. I'm sure I will hear of anything tomorrow if there's something that has happened that I haven't been made aware of, but we'll continue to monitor the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
That's it.
Anybody else have any other questions for city manager, or are we ready to move on to public comment? Community matters. All right, community matters. There are 7 pre-registered speakers, leaving 9 slots for additional speakers on community matters. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. There will be an additional public comment section at the end of the meeting. And let me say, by the way, some people may not be aware that one of the items, probably the item that it was going to attract the most attention to tonight's meeting, was the proposed special use permit for 2005 JPA, which will not be on the agenda tonight. If you want to talk to us about it, happy to hear from you, but it's not going to be on the agenda tonight. So we'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Others wishing to speak may select the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak during community matters, you may press *9. In-person attendees, you may raise your hands to be recognized, and we'll alternate with virtual speakers. So our first speaker was John Hall, and Mr. Hall was patient enough to wait. And is Mr. Hall with us still?
Happy to hear from you, but it's not going to be on the agenda tonight. So we'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Others wishing to speak may select the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak during community matters, you may press.
Mayor Snook, John Hall is with us. You're hearing his audio feed right now. He is on a rather significant delay.
Aha.
So our first speaker was John Hall, and Mr. Hall was patient enough to wait. And is Mr. Hall with us still? Do you hear me? It's not going to be on the agenda tonight. So we'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Others wishing to speak may select the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar to be placed in the speaker queue. If you have joined by phone and wish to speak during community matters, you may.
Mayor Snook, John Hall is with us. You're hearing his audio feed right now. He is on a rather significant delay.
Aha. So our first speaker.
I think we've got a loop.
And Mr. Hall was patient enough to wait. And is Mr. Hall with us still? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? It's John Hall, John Edward Hall.
We can hear you, Mr. Hall.
Mayor Snook, I don't have any way, I guess, to cease that loop that's existing in his audio.
It stopped right now. Mr. Hall, can you speak to us?
Yes, I can speak to you. I think we should start with the Pledge of Allegiance and observe that this is the 78th anniversary of the Normandy invasion. You're lucky that we have a country, and I'm starting to wonder if you're a crook, Lloyd Snook. Crook, Snook? What do you have to say about that, Snook?
Mayor Snook, I don't have any way, I guess, to cease that loop that's existing in his audio.
Do you hear me now, Lloyd?
Mr. Hall, can you speak to us?
Yes, Lloyd. What promises did you make to me, Lloyd? This is the 78th anniversary of the Normandy invasion. You're lucky that we have a country. And I'm starting to wonder if you're a crook, Lloyd Snook. Crook, Snook? What do you have to say about that, Snook?
I don't have any way, I guess, to cease that loop that's existing in his
I don't think this is working. I think we should terminate this and try to figure out some other way to, if Mr. Hall wants to talk to us, because it's just not working. The second speaker, I'll leave it to the staff here. You want to take us through the rest of the list?
Sure, Mayor Snook. The second name on the list is Daniel Watkins, and I don't currently see him on the Zoom, so I'll go to our third speaker, Megan Bushy. And I do not see her in the list either. Our fourth speaker is Kate Fraley.
Oh, okay, Kate's here. All right. Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I wrote a really nice thing, but because of some of your comments, I'm going to have to change it a little bit. So I must say it's really nice to be in a place where I can see you all in 3 dimensions. I wish more people were here. So I've spoken to City Council about, can I take my mask off? Or will that germ up the, can you hear me?
We can hear you
Okay.
just fine.
So about how money is spent and how the police department gets a lot of it, even though other people might be able to get it in the department. So, so I don't know if you remember when I spoke about the Byrne Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant. This was back in 2021. And I was $1 short and a day late because I hadn't seen about it or understood about it, but the police department got that grant and apparently has been getting that grant over and over and over again. But when I researched the grant, it said that the money could be used for wider functions, including prevention and education, drug treatment, planning, evaluation, technology improvement, crime victim and witness initiatives, and mental health programs, including behavioral programs and crisis intervention. So I hope when that grant comes up again, somebody else in the city applies for it so that the police department doesn't get new helmets and new bicycles and stuff like that. So recently, obviously, there's tons of money coming from the federal government and the state government for public safety. And a lot of the talk in the news is that, for instance, an article by Brian Dolliner says jurisdictions nationwide are moving to use the funds to recruit police, weaponize SWAT teams, and build jails. And Biden said that the $350 billion out of the trillion and some could be used to fund the police, when in fact he said that it could be it could be spent on proven strategies like community violence interruption and prevention programs. So public safety, the definition of public safety, is wide in all of this, in the state one, in the federal ones, and I'm afraid, and from the history in Charlottesville, it seems like public safety is kind of automatically heading to the police department. So I was really relieved that you all talked about the Buck Squad and Peace in the Streets and trying to find other avenues. And I want to share with you some other places that are doing that. So in Indiana, they're spending AARP funding $2.7 million for a new crisis center. So they don't have to spend these funds that way on SWAT teams. And in Roanoke, there's an article from 2021, got a $10 million grant as part of the AARP funds, and they gave mini grants to address specific things, including violence interruption. All city departments in Roanoke were involved in trying to figure out how to spend the safety money in different ways.
Ms. Fraley, your time is up.
Oh my gosh. Well, anyway, there are a lot of ideas about what to do. You said you don't know how exactly to do it, but there are a lot of people out there already doing it, figuring out the root causes, fixing the root causes of crime.
Happy to get a list from you.
I will.
You know how to find us.
Gosh, that was wordy. Huh? Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is John Faltz. Is he online with us?
I hope so. Do you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I want to talk about traffic on Hydraulic Road, which can be horrific at rush hour. I know. I have to drive through it sometimes. But the proposed roundabout at Hydraulic and Hillside is not an acceptable answer for at least 3 reasons. First, it just won't work. If you have the proposed scheme with you, try to visualize yourself leaving Whole Foods on Hillside and crossing 2 lanes of almost continuous traffic to make the left turn and come back into the city. Even the traffic manager is somewhat dubious about this. Second reason, eliminating the stoplight isolates the affordable housing on Mitchie Drive, and there's a lot of it. We shop at Kroger's. Almost every time we see people from Mitchie Drive on one side or the other waiting to cross the street. I just came through this evening. 2 people were there. Painted zebra stripes do not stop traffic. Else we would not need a pedestrian bridge across US 29. We want our city to be walkable. Let's keep it that way. We must keep the stoplights so pedestrians can use the intersection. Third reason, we are a city with city streets. Through traffic should never go through a city. In other metropolitan areas, it goes around the city in ring roads. Our MPO already has a partial 4-lane ring road. It's Rio Road. We spent over $150 million to grade separated from US 29. Now it must be extended at either end, connect with 250 East or US 220 and to the US 220 South. Doing that is a much better solution for heavy traffic on Hydraulic Road and elsewhere in the area. I mean, please, never let our city become a regional cloverleaf. I don't know if I have more time. Do I?
30 seconds.
Okay. Have any city residents or many city residents complained about Hydraulic Road? You, Lloyd Snook, and Mr. Pinkston are both on MPO. Do they? Okay, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Faltz.
Our next speaker on the list is Nina Barnes. Is Nina in the room? Because I do not see Nina on Zoom.
Nina is not in the room.
Our next speaker will be Tony Winter. And Tony is also not joining us on Zoom.
All right. So are there any other speakers, first of all, any other speakers here in the room who would like to pipe up at this point? Okay, we've got a hand raised. Come forward. Identify yourself and tell us what you want to tell us.
Thank you. My name is Gretchen Brown, and I'm the new co-lead for our local Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America chapter. And I just wanted to thank you all for your commitment to gun violence prevention in all of its forms. I know that at the city level, we're kind of limited, but we're anxious to work with you and many violence interruption programs. I just wanted to thank you for your proclamation. So,
thank you. Anybody else online? Anybody else here in person? Okay. Anybody else online?
Our first raised hand will be Tanisha Hudson. Tanisha, you're on with council.
All right.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
So, Lloyd, it was very inappropriate of you to bring up the swimming pools and not mention what we discussed yesterday at the BCBA games or the Tonsor League games. So I want to start with the parks. First and foremost, glass backboard rims were promised from Brian Daly and also Todd, who was the former Parks and Recs director. And Sam, for you to have drove around yesterday, making sure that everything worked, you missed the basketball hoops. Now I'm gonna give y'all a little history because the BCBA started 13 years ago, to be exact. Damian Banks has been putting up new rims in Tonsor Park for about the last 7 years, even after you remodeled the park. He would also bring additional nets because the nets are often ripped. Lloyd, you saw yesterday, one rim is up, one rim is down. You have spent more money on these sprinkler systems than you do for any other piece in the parks. It's unacceptable. And then when you talk about equity, inclusivity, and diversity, more Black people play basketball. This league has been happening for the last 13 years in this city. And you have yet to provide any assistance to that league to make it even better. And then I was told by Wes Bellamy that you told him he had to play on the front court. So let's talk about the safety hazards. One, the generator was sitting in the grass. And I don't know if y'all know, but gas is that's not too safety to be sitting in grass and somebody throw a cigarette butt or something and that generator catches on fire and is sitting in the grass. The generator should be on the court, which makes more sense for them to play on the court where the fence is because it offers them a safety net. Two, I was told you told them to play on that side of the court because of handicap accessibility. Well, with everybody covering the ramp, how's a wheelchair gonna get down there? Did you think about the safety net of the players? And that if they're dunking the ball, that big cement wall that you're gonna have a lawsuit against your risk management for if somebody go out there and harm themselves. because you told them to play on that front court. To act like y'all have all the sense in the world, and this goes for all 5 counselors, all of y'all, it makes no sense that you would even promote anything like that when you clearly violated all types of safety policies. It just doesn't make sense to me. Now on to affordable housing. Woodard, you allotted Woodard a tax incentive to keep certain units affordable, where those units aren't affordable to anybody because they're telling them they need to make 3 times the rent. So with you all getting all this additional federal funding, Florida is doing a rent relief where they pay the difference in the rent. Charlottesville should look into doing that because you know everybody's raising their rent anywhere from $500 to $1,000. And your citizens can't afford to live in the city in which they work. So that's something that you all can put money to use for. The next time you want to give Alexander money to just put out posters that's going to end up on the ground, you can take that money and upgrade all those basketball hoops in every park in Charlottesville.
Ms. Hudson,
Thank
your
you.
time is up.
Good night.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Our next speaker on Zoom will be Greg Weaver. Greg, you are on with council.
Hey, City Council, this is Greg Weaver in Fry Spring. I'm looking forward to digging into the transit vision draft more, but at first glance from the presentation earlier today, the plan may be a vision, but I wouldn't necessarily call it visionary. From what I saw, the plan is flawed. It doesn't take into account or suggest any changes in land use or changes to our roadways when we need to be thinking transformationally. That is, we can have even better service than what the maps show if we adjust our land use and transform our roadways to limit the mobility of cars. Mr. Pinkston was asking how we can change habits, and I would say that we do it by making these material changes in tandem. And on that note, I want to voice my support for the 5th Street road diet. I think we need to be looking in a similar way at all of our streets. Where can we cut personal vehicle mobility partially or even fully in favor of bus lanes, protected bike lanes, and sidewalks? I am encouraged by y'all's response to a potential road diet and look forward to seeing how that turns out. One thing I think is important to keep in mind, though, is that habits won't change overnight. So, for example, while we may see a slight change in bus ridership due to the addition of the bus lane, 6 months of testing with the current levels of service won't cause many, if any, people to upend their daily routines and ditch their cars. That is going to take more time and a more complete transformation all over the city. And that's something that we can do as long as we have the vision. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver.
Our next speaker on Zoom is Robin Hoffman once again.
All right.
Robin, you are on with council.
Hi, I'm sorry I got very irate about myself having to talk about gun violence, but it's really important that we concentrate on how relieved we'd be if we didn't have military-style weapons in this country, given out so liberally. So every city right now, including Richmond, is gathering all of their ordinances, every single thing that they are empowered to do to eliminate military-style weapons. Charlottesville is a small city. We don't have enough management, I guess, to start imposing those restrictions, but we do have to do that. I think it has to be a priority. Look, if you have children in schools right now, they're hiding in cubby holes 4 times a day. This is stupid, okay? This is just moronic that this has been allowed to happen. In the first place, Second Amendment means that you can't do harm to others as well. And so that is the law. If you are holding a military-style weapon, you have to be in the military. And by the way, if you sold every single gun that everybody's carrying, 400 million people, military-style weapons in this country, and gave it to the Ukrainians, we would be able to save our $34 billion that we're sending them to arm themselves. And by the way, Chief Brackney told me personally the reason why people do have those guns is because Russia sends them to us, and so does Hungary. So that's what is the reality. So look at FedEx, look at all the different ways that it's being sent and mailed. They have x-rays, they know if something, like if you want to send a package, they'll look at your package. So they know that these are coming here, and there has to be restrictions, period. And each city needs to coordinate with every other mayor, every other governor, every other senator, and say, that's it. We're not having any more of this, period. And that's what Australia did. And they're not walking around, and their kids aren't walking, not being able to learn because people haven't taken the steps. And those are the steps. That's it. It doesn't have to go through Congress or anything else. Those weapons harm people. That is the law. You can't carry something that harms people, period. And it shouldn't be that if we have Martin Luther King's birthday, people are standing there with their military-style weapons in Richmond and saying, oh, look how powerful we are. We have military-style weapons. No, these are not normal things. And,
Thank you, Ms.
we have
Hoffman.
to stand up. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Chris Meyer. Chris, you are on with City Council.
Can't hear you.
All right. Good evening, councilors, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. I'm a resident of Charlottesville. I'm speaking as a resident of Charlottesville, not as executive director of LEAP, the Local Energy Alliance program. My comments this evening are about Charlottesville Gas. I read its report as part of the rate hearing later this meeting, and some things in it not related to the rate were very concerning. I do know that I think Charlottesville Gas is a very well-run part of our city government. However, it is a gas utility, which means that there are things they just can't get rid of even with good management. Although we'll start with that there were 90 leaks of methane in 2021. 90 leaks. The report doesn't say where, for how long, or how big, but I'd venture that one leak is one too many. I also note that there are, I guess, hundreds of abnormal operating conditions. That term, I think, is a euphemism basically for corroded pipes and meters that need fixing. Please do fix those sooner rather than later, as they sound like they're quite leaky too. Next, I'll go to its climate plans, which are essential for the city to achieve the climate goals it took on. While I'll credit Charlottesville Gas for having energy efficiency programs and starting to offset some of its related emissions, the fact of the matter is that between 2016 and 2019, according to the latest city emissions inventory, had both Charlottesville Gas's total greenhouse gas emissions and the units consumed going up by 15% and not actually down. This is likely because Charlottesville Gas continues to add customers rather than stopping to add customers. Another concerning part of their climate strategy is getting free emission offsets from British Petroleum, who supplies the gas according to the report. I went down the rabbit hole to find the offsets Seville Gas is claiming to use and wound up looking at a blurry map of the world supposedly showing where all these offsets projects are. I'll just note that free doesn't usually get you anything of quality. So this strategy really needs to be examined, and I'd highly suggest they start looking for local projects to get these offsets from. I sent you a memo late last week, and all this information is in that memo. In closing, I'm not suggesting that we shut down Charlottesville Gas right now today, but we do need to plan for how we'll meet its ends or being decommissioned in the near future, and we need to figure out that plan sooner rather than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Our next raised hand is Joy Johnson. Joy, you are on with council.
Good evening. Okay. Good evening. My name is Joy Johnson. I am a public housing resident and an affordable housing advocate. Ditto to what Ms. Hudson had to say, but I would like to enlighten you a little bit more of some of the problems we're having with people with vouchers and people who are in a domestic situation who is looking for a place that they can afford. Most of the apartment complexes are asking you if the unit, if a one-bedroom unit is $1,094, they want you to make 3 times the amount. You have to be making 3 times the amount of rent per month. That does not make any sense because most folks is not making $4,000 a rent a month. You might have some middle class and upper middle class people making that. But the working poor does not make $4,000 per month. And on top of that, they're still holding criminal backgrounds against some people. University Heights is one of them. So on one hand, you have a list of criminal activities, even if it was 10, 20 years held against you. And also you have to make 3 times the amount of rent. I want you all counselors, all 5 of you, to understand this problem is getting worse. Even with Mallside right now, they have went up on their rent. A 1-bedroom has gone up $122 extra. Everyone is going up, and I don't see, we need some kind of rent cap or something in this city because working poor people cannot find affordable, deeply affordable housing, not even with a voucher. I hope you all put some highlight or some attention to this, or else you are going to have a lot of homeless people on your street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Our next raised hand is Dee Dee Smith. Dee Dee, you are on with council.
Good evening. Dee Dee Smith, City of Charlottesville. And I promise I did not coordinate with Chris Meyer, but I was really pleased to hear his comments because my comments are actually along the same lines, but kind of different about climate, your commitment, your laudable commitment to climate change and the irony of the fact that you own the gas monopoly. And what I really just wanted you to pay attention to tonight as you hear your presentation is the millions of dollars that you profit into the general fund. It's moved from the gas enterprise fund into the general fund, millions. It's $6 million altogether in something called payment in lieu of taxes. And most of that is from gas. And the reason I bring it up is because as you are going to have to cut back on natural gas in order to meet your climate goals, you are going to then lose that income. And it is something that councils have not really been very willing to talk a lot about. You will be told it's not a profit, but it is a profit. It is moved out of enterprise gas fund into the general fund. So I just think it would be wise to start thinking about and planning for not being dependent on this very high revenue source out of what is actually something that is worsening our climate. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Our next speaker will be Lakeisha Washington. Lakeisha, you are on with council.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lakeisha Washington, and I'm a resident in the Fry Springs area. I just wanted to make a comment as well about the climate goal. I feel like sometimes when we look at these plans, we neglect to see how this factors people who actually rent and don't have the ability to make a lot of changes to be able to save money. And so I do hope that when considering these goals that you will be encouraged to push landlords more to more and better proper insulation in these apartments, and also looking at, taking out baseboard heating and implementing a new approach or central air for a lot of apartments, because this is where a lot of people spend their money who are renters. And if we are, very serious about affordable housing, this is an area that a lot of families deal with, and they have to work more than one job just to make sure that those main bills are getting paid for. And so I do hope that you guys will consider that moving forward as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Washington.
Mayor Snook, there are no further hands raised.
All right. So that was our final speaker then for Community Matters. We will now move to the action items portion of the agenda. And the first of those is the rate report. Proposed utility rate report for FY 2023. Chris Cullinan, Lauren Hildebrand are in front of us there via Zoom. Take it away.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Chris Cullinan, Director of Finance, joined by Lauren Hildebrand, Director of Utilities. This agenda item is a public hearing and first reading of the ordinance setting water, wastewater, natural gas, and stormwater rates effective July 1st, 2022 for fiscal year 2023. We have a presentation this evening covering an update on the utility operations and infrastructure, and then followed by the rate report itself. I'm going to turn over to Lauren, and I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. And let Lauren take it away.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the operations. Here's a little information about water and wastewater utility. We serve 14,500 customers in the city. We deliver 4.5 million gallons of water daily. We maintain 183 miles of water lines, 172 miles of wastewater pipelines. And last year, our workforce handled over 8,500 work orders that were completed as part of the operations and maintenance of the systems. From a water quality standpoint, we just recently completed our consumer confidence report, which indicates the quality of our water meets and exceeds all regulatory requirements. This report is published annually as required by the regulatory agencies, and it can be found on our website at charlottesville.gov/water quality. And we urge people to look at it. And if they have questions, they can email or contact us at the, there's contacts listed within the report if people have questions about what information we've supplied. We also try to minimize water loss within our system, because if we minimize water loss, we reduce cost. We have a meter testing and replacement program where we test our large meters that are greater than 1.5 inches. And the reason we do that is meters age, they tend to slow down and they're inaccurate when they bill. And so we make sure that they're operating within the 5% tolerance. If they're not, we replace them with in-house staff. We also do an annual-wide, system-wide leak detection survey. This has been going on since 2010 annually. And we go through our entire system because we find some of our leaks don't come to the surface, even though they're from a pressurized water system. And we want to make sure those leaks get addressed, as well as the other leaks that come to the surface every day. These leaks, we totaled 13 leaks last year. They estimate that we saved over 500,000 gallons, and they were repaired by in-house staff. We also have recently changed our meter installations from positive displacement meters to ultrasonic meters. We find the ultrasonic meters are more accurate, and they measure the lower flow on the spectrum, so that minimizes water loss. We also have an asset management program where we have a pretty aggressive replacement rehabilitation program associated with our water mains, our wastewater systems, as well as our stormwater system. Since 2010, since the program's inception, we've prioritized our water mains that tend to be more leaky. We want to make sure that we have proper redundancy in the system and proper fire protection, and we've replaced 11.6% of the entire water system associated with water line main replacement. Associated with wastewater rehabilitation, we've rehabbed or replaced since the program's inception about 28% of the wastewater system. And regarding the stormwater rehab system, we've rehabbed or replaced about 10.4% of the system since 2009. We do a customer satisfaction survey every year, and this year we were very satisfied with the response. People find the reliability of our water and wastewater system. They're satisfied with the reliability. From a value standpoint, which is the value that they paid for water and sewer, they're 95% excellent, good, and fair as far as value related to water service, and 92% excellent, good, and fair related to sewer service. Now we shift to the natural gas system. We serve 21,300 customers, and this is city customers as well as county customers. In the city, we actually serve, out of the total wastewater customers, they're 88% get gas service. We maintain 342 miles of gas lines, 300 miles of gas service lines. And last year, we completed over 11,500 work orders to maintain our system. We also recognize with the gas system, we are part of the fossil fuel industry, and we try to be conscious of that and reduce our greenhouse gas reductions with certain strategies. We offer rebates, and one rebate I want to highlight is our attic insulation of $300. This was started a few years ago, and we encourage people to ask us about that. We also have a free weatherization program associated with income qualified natural gas households. And we coordinate this program with Chris Meyer and his team at the LEAP offices here locally. We have been able to help assist 124 households so far with this program, contributing over $173,000. And we actually have been able to quantify the reductions in gas consumption over the winter months of on the average of about 20%. So we feel this program has been a pretty big success. We also purchase carbon offsets. These are considered high quality carbon offsets to offset our carbon emissions by 25% of our natural gas operations. We do this at a cost. It cost us about over $340,000 a year. We started this program last year, and we were able to reduce other budget items so that currently this is at no cost to our customers. And it's not proposed to be any cost to our customers in next year's budget. We were able to take a really close look at how we could do this, and we really wanted to do this in order to meet our help assist meet our carbon offset goals. In addition, we go back a minute, sorry. We also participated in an energy saving tree giveaway program with the Arbor Day Tree Foundation. This occurred this past year where we gave 250 trees, and it was kind of a cool program where people are able to go on a website and position the tree in their property so that it offers them the biggest benefit from an energy savings and a cost savings aspect. And they have to make commitments. They're going to plant the tree. People were very excited to come pick up their tree, and we will be doing this program in the future. We also are very conscious not only of energy efficiency, and we want to make more homes more energy efficient, we also are conscious about our emissions that can result from leaks out of our system. And we have the best state-of-the-art leak detection equipment with in-house people doing annual surveys of our systems. They do the business surveys and our critical assets on an annual basis, and all residential customers our leak survey is completed every 3 years. This is actually a little more, we're required by regulatory agencies to do this, and we are actually a little more aggressive with those timeframes than what the requirement is. And I might add, our gas system is a fairly new system. My predecessors before me in the late 90s and early 2000s actually did a complete replacement of our gas system, which minimizes the leaks out of our system. In addition, we have an award-winning gas safety awareness plan, which we try to promote with people so they can detect what gas actually smells like and report it immediately us to address. In addition, I'd like to also highlight that the city recently released in 2022 their city's greenhouse gas reduction by sector and fuel type report. This was based on data was collected in 2019, and associated with the natural gas system, there's a greenhouse gas reduction of 30%. Along with that, there's customer satisfaction survey from a reliability standpoint. People say they can rely on their natural gas service 100% of the time. They value their natural gas, and what they pay for natural gas, 91% is excellent, good, and fair. And how important it is to have gas available to your home is 95%, extremely, very or somewhat important. We also launched an online billing pay service last year in October, and this offers paperless billing, pay by text, and enhanced automated payment options. More than 6,400 customers have already signed up for paperless billing, and we continue to want to promote that by people getting online and looking at charlottesville.gov/bill-pay, because the more people that sign up, it saves us money, it's a convenience for people, and we recognize it. So far, this in over a year's time will save over $38,000 just by those 6,400 customers signing up. And this was in response to last year and the year before's customer survey, where people really wanted an online billing system. So we really do take these customer satisfaction surveys very seriously. So with this year's survey, we asked people what they thought, and they're extremely satisfied with the online payment portal we've already launched. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you, Lauren. This is just a brief overview on how we operate the utilities financially. They operate on a break-even basis. The rates for water, wastewater, and stormwater are set on July 1st of each year and don't change during the course of the year as those costs are known and are projected to be, the revenue requirements are projected to be recouped based on the projected usage. Gas rates are a little unique. Natural gas is a commodity that's traded on a daily basis. And so the gas rates are adjusted every month to account for changes in the cost of gas. It's called the PGA, the Purchase Gas Adjustment on your bill. When the price of gas goes up, we pass that increase along, but when the cost goes down, we pass that reduction along as well, again, to ensure that we're breaking even. I'll touch a little bit more on that in a couple of slides here. The rates and charges are used only to cover the costs of their respective utility. To put another way, water rates pay for expenses of the water utility, wastewater rates for the wastewater, et cetera. And the rates that are being proposed this evening will be effective this upcoming July 1st. And so for the average customer in the city who receive all four utilities, as Lauren mentioned, that's roughly 88% of the folks in the city. The bottom line is they're going to see their utility bill go up by just slightly less than $4 a month, or a little over 3%. And you can see the relative contribution of each of the of the utilities to that. And again, this assumes an average water customer. Wastewater customer uses roughly 100 gallons per day. You see the assumption there for natural gas, as well as the average lot size in terms of impervious surface area for the stormwater calculation. So overall, rates are going up by slightly less than $4. And we'll go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So to cover the costs of the operations, the infrastructure, the debt service for the various utilities that Lauren highlighted in her portion of the presentation, the revenue requirements for water is about $15.2 million in the upcoming fiscal year. Wastewater is about $15.8 million. And as you can see with both of these, the largest segment of that is for purchase of services and the city's share of debt service from the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority. To break it down even further, it's roughly for Ravenna, it's about a 50-50 split in terms of operating costs in the city's portion of the debt service, which was attributable to us. We also see this portion of a pie is going for city operations. These are for Lauren's folks and for their operations and maintenance efforts. On the water side, it's about 27%, wastewater side, about 25%. We also see debt service attributable to each utility. This is debt service for bonds that the city issues for our wastewater collection system and our water distribution system for our pipe systems for those utilities. And then you also see the smallest piece of each one. This is for our customer service and billing, our utility billing office, meter reading, and those related activities. Gas is the largest of the four utilities. The revenue requirement next year projected to be $31.4 million. The largest piece of that, the purchase of gas from British Petroleum, you see there is 45%. To put that somewhat in perspective, that segment a year ago was 40%. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about gas in depth in a slide or so, but that piece of the pie has certainly gotten much larger. And again, you see the contributions for city operations and maintenance, the payment in lieu of taxes attributable to the gas utility, capital improvements, and then the customer service segment of that as well. And then down there in the lower right for stormwater, it's roughly $3.6 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And again, the biggest jump there is related to capital improvements and debt service. Again, infrastructure, utilities generally have a much larger ratio of debt service, given that they are intense infrastructure oriented operations, higher than, say, general government. Some of the figures that you've seen when we do the budget each year. And then you see the relative contribution for salaries and benefits and operating expenses of the stormwater utility. And so to meet these revenue requirements for each utility, the volumetric rates for water, wastewater, and natural gas are projected to change as follows. The water increase of about 15%, wastewater about 3%, and natural gas going down slightly from current bills. I'll note that there are no changes being proposed for the stormwater utility and no changes to the monthly service charges for water, wastewater, and gas. This is the portion of the bill based on how much you consume of that utility. Just a couple of notes here. For wastewater, we do have some available fund balance that we're going to use to help offset some of that rate increase to try to keep that rate increase manageable. On the natural gas side, the decrease, we're using about $2.5 million of cash to cash fund the capital improvements related to natural gas. Lauren noted in her presentation the foresight of some of her predecessors in terms of replacing the natural gas system. We are actually, the gas utility is debt-free at this point. We made the last payment maybe about a year ago for those upgrades undertaken decades ago. We actually do pay off debt sometimes. It seems like we're in a constant issuing and paying, but we do pay it off in its completion. And so we're in that state of the natural gas fund. So we're going to use cash to do that. We're also using $1.3 million from a settlement with our transportation provider on our pipeline for gas. We were improperly charged along with other customers on the pipeline. And so again, we're gonna try to get those monies back into the hands of customers as fast as we can to offset some of the rising natural gas prices. And so that accounts for that decline that you see there. One thing to know about the natural gas rates, as I mentioned, these change on a monthly basis. And so when we do this analysis, we are setting the rate, the base rate for July 1st, but it is a projection based on the April 1st cost of gas. This is an approach that we've used for a number of years. It meets the financial and the legal requirements of how we do that. It also ensures that we're using an apples-to-apples comparison year over year, again, based on the notion that these do adjust on a monthly basis. The price of gas has been going up. The rate, what folks are paying today is higher than it was a year ago. The events that we see in the world on the global geopolitical stage in terms of a war in Ukraine, inflation, those things impact us here in Charlottesville as well in terms of the prices that we pay to purchase gas. And so, again, we're using some cash to try to mitigate those impacts. Certainly folks have some degree of control in terms of their own consumption, in terms of weatherizing their homes, some of those sorts of things. But still, gas prices are higher than they have been a year ago and higher than they've been for a number of years. Not quite as high as we saw in the late aughts. We saw some much higher rates than we do now. But I'm not in the business of trying to predict natural gas prices, but based on what I see in the news, and I'm sure you do as well, there doesn't seem to be, the war in Ukraine seems to be at something of a stalemate. Inflation, in the short term at least, continues to be where it is. And so, again, I would anticipate the natural gas prices to continue to be at levels where they are. Certainly it's something we monitor on a regular basis, and to the extent that we can help mitigate those, we certainly take those opportunities. Well, one final thing for your consideration this evening. This is something which you haven't really seen before. These are our proposed facility fees for water and wastewater. What these are, what these represent are the costs of new development for their proportionate impact for additional capacity on our water and wastewater system. So these are only assessed against new development. This was a program that was put in place in 2008. There was a minor modification made to it in 2012. So it's been a little while since this has been looked at. But the change that we're bringing to you this evening really focuses on the water meters that are 3 inches and larger. So if you look over on the left-hand side of the column there, we're looking at the meter sizes of 3, 4, and 6 inches. As Lauren mentioned during her presentation, meter technology has improved. The meters, a meter now provides more capacity today than perhaps one of its predecessors years ago. And so in order to make sure that new development is being charged its proportionate share, we need to recalibrate these. And I'll use the 3-inch for example. So under the current schedule, the older 3-inch meters, you could measure 15 ERCs or equivalent residential connections. Think of it as 15 single-family homes is what a 3-inch meter can provide in terms of capacity. And so under the current fees, they would pay $46,500 for their proportionate share of that capacity. But we know the new meters, a new 3-inch meter, can actually accommodate 25 ERCs, so it provides that additional capacity, much like a old 4-inch one did, as you see in the row below that there. And so for 25 ERCs, the water facility fee is $77,500. And so it's really just ensuring that we're maintaining that proportionality and that new development is paying its share. And so to think about it this way, if a new development came before us and they required 25 ERCs, under the old meters, they would get a 4-inch meter, pay $77,500. But under a new one, they're still paying the same $77,500. They just need a 3-inch meter now. And so that's what this attempts to do, is to recalibrate these fees. And that concludes our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Thank you, Mr. Cullinan. Ms. Hildebrand. Councilors, questions? Anybody? Just so folks will know, we actually have talked with Mr. Cullinan and Ms. Hildebrand. It's not just we're sitting here dumb, having no clue about anything that's going on. We've had some fairly extensive discussions on other occasions. So if there are no other questions and clarifying questions, let me open the public hearing. Mr. Dillahunter, we...
Mr. Mayor?
Oh.
Could I ask
Sure.
one question? I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for the information you've given us by email as well. And I recognize a lot of hard work went into that report and all the work with the rate setting. And I'm on the board with Ravenna and have enjoyed and appreciated the professionalism that y'all have brought to your side of all of this. One question I have has to do with when we bring on new users to the system. So we don't have like more land that we can acquire to develop, but when we have infill developments or things like that, is there any thought to when new water supply is brought online for a new development, those rates somehow subsidizing the rates for existing customers? I don't know, does that question make sense at all? In other words, has thought gone into, when we bring on new developments, is it just sort of a linear add-on to the whole thing, or is it they end up paying more to sort of have access to the system, and then also perhaps to subsidize the rates?
So the facility fees are the mechanism by which new development pays into the infrastructure system for additional capacity. So that existing customers are not subsidizing new development, that they're paying their proportionate share.
Okay.
But then in terms of the rates themselves, at the end of the day, the litmus test is you pay for what you use.
Okay.
And so when the rates are set, certainly the additional number of cubic feet over which we're spreading those costs, if you think back to our middle school math, it's a numerator denominator.
Right.
And so the extent that we can make the denominator bigger in terms of additional usage, it helps that rate.
Got it.
The reality is that on the water and wastewater side, we add maybe 10 new customers a year. It's not a lot. It's very, very different than, say, our counterparts at the Albemarle County Service Authority.
Okay.
And one of the other things to keep in mind when there is new development, or I should say redevelopment, if there is already a water meter there, they get credit for what was there already.
Okay.
So and then they only pay the difference if there's an increase in that meter capacity needed. Again, it's the idea that this new whatever is replacing something that was already there that had paid its share into the system. And so if there's any net additional capacity, they just pay that net difference, if at anything at all. Sometimes it's a wash. Lauren, did you want to add anything to that?
No, and the only thing I will add is that's the reason the facility fees were put in place, so that the historical customer didn't necessarily pay for development and the capacity that development needed. So that was the reason the facility fees originated in 2008.
Thank you. And then I guess the second question has to do with the offsets, the carbon offsets for the natural gas, and just thinking in terms of the natural gas utility itself and some of the points that have been brought up both outside of this meeting and then earlier in the public comment. How are your efforts tied into the ongoing work that the city's trying to do in terms of climate Could you speak, I know that's a very large question, but can you speak a little specifically to natural gas?
So we are very aware and trying to support the climate action goals that were established by council previously. For example, it's 45% by 2030. And so we want to do our fair share in trying to align that carbon offset purchase with our, really align that with our energy efficiency programs, resulting in lower emissions and trying to align that together. So that's the reason we made a conscious decision to start purchasing carbon offsets.
Got it. And then in terms of the possibility, the sort of the future status of the Charlottesville gas system, are there studies happening, or sort of what's the sort of future, what sort of envisioning is going on for a gas system 20 years in the future?
Yeah, that's so, you know, we certainly listened to the comments and made by council at the Climate Action Plan presentation at a work session in recent months, and took the suggestion of studying the natural gas utility very seriously. And so we are currently putting together a scope of work to, with the assistance of the Environmental Sustainability Group, their input along with others at the city, and try to make sure we look at all aspects of it from a legal standpoint, look at the technology that's coming, you know, being proposed, and hopefully will be here, you know, in the near future, and take all that into consideration, and try to get somebody to put that together for us and make some recommendations.
Do you have any sense of when that study will be scoped out and ready to move forward?
We're developing that scope as we speak. I would also add that, you know, we want to look at obviously from dollars and cents standpoint in terms of, you know, how do you maintain the utility in terms of a safety, reliability, as at the same time you're decommissioning it? It seems sort of, you know, to be two thoughts that are at odds with each other. We also want to be very conscious for our customers of what that impact is, what alternatives are available, how does that impact, you know, for some folks, they can make a choice, they can exercise that choice in terms of finding an alternative energy source, but for some folks, they may not be able to. There was a comment earlier about renters or some folks who just simply don't have the means to do that. So we want to, you know, be able to balance all of these things as we look forward in terms of how we go about this, or what the steps are, or what a logical progression of that might be.
And I'll just add, we hope that somebody can really think seriously about affordability and the impact to our customers.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to add on, because I was going to just kind of make a question or comment about the kind of the decommissioning of the system, of the gas system, but so thank you for responding to what I was going to ask, and just kind of as a citizen, at least for me, the issues of with gas, it seemed to come up over the last few years, even though the studies and things may have been out there, because I know that maybe 6 or 7 years ago, we, my wife and I, we kind of redid our kitchen, and we intentionally added gas, and I'm pretty sure we were up on the issues, you know, in the environment. I just don't recall the negative reports and things that we hear about gas, you know, as we hear now. I'm sure we probably wouldn't have done it. And so it is challenging, because I know we probably wouldn't do it, but it wouldn't be cost effective for us now to go in and change the whole system out. And so I understand what you're going through. So we will look forward to the report and see what impacts, what we can do as we try to do the right thing as a city, but, understanding that we just can't turn on a dime and to address this. So thank you very much.
Other clarifying questions at this point, or are we ready to go to public comment, to public questions or public comments? Okay, so let's move then to the public hearing phase here, and I will now open the public hearing. Mr. Dillahunt, do we have anybody who wishes to speak on the matter?
We do, Mayor. Chris Meyer will be the first person to speak. Chris, you are back on with council.
Thank you, councilors, and thank you for the opportunity again to speak at this public hearing on the rates for Charlottesville Gas. I want to thank the management at Charlottesville Gas, Lauren and Chris. I think they did a great job presenting and had addressed a lot of the concerns that I had seen in the reports. And happy to see, I think, the direction that they're moving. Regarding the rates, though, specifically, and I'm happy they clarified this, that they're not providing free offsets or getting them for free, but actually paying for them. But they're still not including the full cost of the pollution, unfortunately. They're only covering 25% of the cost of pollution. So from an economics perspective, Charlottesville Gas is not actually correctly pricing the product because that negative externality, that pollution that's not getting offset, is being put on society. So we do need to think about kind of what that actual cost is, and that should be included in the rates. I will note that Dominion Virginia Power is paying for its emissions or pollution, and you can see it represented in your bill. Seaville Gas should do the same thing. In those rates, and it was mentioned in the capital improvement plans, there's a project that is the West Main high pressure pipeline, or new piping, that would replace the existing pipe there. It's a $1.5 million gas line going down West Main. I do not think we should be including that in our infrastructure plans or the Seaville Gas infrastructure plans, and because it will ultimately be decommissioned, and we're talking about that in 10 to 15 years, when I think these pipelines are supposed to be meant to be amortized over 30 or 40 years. So we should not be investing $1.5 million and tearing up West Main for I don't know how many months to again replace that pipe. Secondly, I would ask, and I think this is getting what they're getting to in their plans, and some of you mentioned, but at the last Dominion, again, Virginia Power stakeholder meeting, they were asked by its shareholders, and the resolution was approved to have a plan for an analysis on the mitigating of the stranded assets, i.e. the value of our system and what happens when there are less people paying for the gas on it and or it gets getting shut down. So that should definitely be part of the analysis. I think that sounds like they're scoping, and I'd love to hear about that in the near future. Finally, I think the presentations of the bills and rates should be overhauled to better explain what people are paying for. The gas bill does not reflect every month the $10 for the standard meter charge, nor what you're paying for fuel versus transmission. Those things should be separately discussed and presented at each bill so people understand what they're actually paying for the fuel, i.e. the gas, versus, again, the transmission of the system. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and again, good presentation by Charlottesville Gas Management.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Our next raised hand is Dee Dee Smith. Dee Dee, you are back on with council.
Thank you. And once again, I'll piggyback on Chris Meyer's comments. And my comments are about rates this time. I've tried to be appropriate here. I also on our bill, there should be a separate, I've argued this for years, a separate accounting of how much is this payment in lieu of taxes. And do note that the payment in lieu of taxes on both water and gas are actually added to the rate, and then that rate is then taxed again in what is called the utility tax. The utility tax is on the bill, and the utility tax is separately listed in your revenue section in your budget. But it actually, the pilot, which is a payment in lieu of tax, but it is a tax. It's about 25% on some part of that gas. I think it's on the gas itself, and I think it's about 10% on the water itself. And that is taxed again on the utility tax. So that's double taxation for one thing. But, you know, all of this comes down to affordability. And, you know, Ms. Washington earlier in the public comments talked about this, is that those of us who can find alternatives, Mr. Cullinan talked about those of us who can find alternatives to these expensive utilities and these climate changing utilities do so. Toilets is an absolutely perfect example of this, is that the city still has a lot of toilets that are high flow. And they also have the oldest housing, which has the leakiest toilets. And those toilets are not in any of your houses or in my house. They're in people who are struggling, for the most part. And I would actually just ask that you clarify. I couldn't figure out what the water rates were going up. It said 12% in one chart, and then it said 15% in another chart. You are going to hear at your next meeting about another $200 million in the next 5 years of debt service that's going to be added to Rivanna, $500 million over, you know, in the total CIP. I mean, it's just going to, I think we have to really anticipate how this is going to impact people. And just one last note, if I have time, is the problem with paying for all this debt is that our water use has not changed in 20 years. It was supposed to have gone up another 50%, and it didn't. And that is largely this toilet thing. I mean, the toilets reduction was like 75% in a flush. Same time, does for those of people who have new toilets. But how are we going to, but the bigger point being, is putting all this debt on there, the demand is not going up. In the county, number of customers is going up, but again, you heard tonight, Mr. Cullinan told you, our customer numbers are not going up. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Okay, so with no further speakers, the public hearing is now closed. Council, what's your pleasure? You want to place this on the June 21st consent agenda for a second reading?
That would be fine with me.
Fine with me, and would just add to that, I would echo comments Councilor Pinkston made earlier. Be curious at some point how we get more specific follow-up about the scoping and timing of that report that was mentioned, about the future of our natural gas utility, as well as for a follow-up with some more information about carbon offset programs and how it compares to other industry standards. Quite frankly, I just don't know enough to say, but that's it.
All right. So let's put it on the consent agenda for the second reading for next meeting, and ask staff to get us some more information on those points. All right, next public hearing is to consider the concurrent resolution of the City Council of the City of Charlottesville and the Board of Supervisors of the County of Albemarle to extend the existence of the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority. Mr. Rogers?
Yes, sir. What is before you is a resolution that would reauthorize the Rivanna Authority. It was organized in 1972. It's been 50 years. It expires tomorrow, and so this action is placed here for renewal. And the Albemarle County Board of Commissioners will, at the appropriate time soon, take a similar action.
Okay. So, councilors, any clarifying questions before we hear from the public?
Just clarifying, is this something that's done like every few years?
50.
Every 50.
50. I mean, so I
you may be still on council then, but I will not.
Yeah, my next question was like, I guess no one here has done this before.
So we have no prior experience.
Yes.
Right.
Making history.
I will say 72 was a very good year.
Yes, it was.
Okay. So we'll now open the public hearing on the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority reauthorization. Mr. Delahunt, anybody wish to speak on the matter?
Mayor Snook, I see no hands raised.
I should ask if anybody in chambers wishes to speak on the matter. I see a whole lot of shaking of the heads. Okay. All right. So with no further speakers, the public hearing is now closed. Any discussion of the matter? If not, is there a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we reapprove our, I need to find the actual language, but the resolution that we, concurrent resolution of the City Council and the Board of Supervisors to extend the existence of the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority. I move that we do that.
Thank you. Is there a second to this
Second.
motion? Any discussion? Nope. Okay, Ms. Thomas, will you take the vote, please?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda had been the special use permit for 2005-2007 JPA. As we've noted before, that has been rescheduled to a yet undetermined date. And I think it's probably appropriate to mention, at least just briefly, why. There were a number of issues that were raised at the Planning Commission, and the approval that the Planning Commission gave in some ways was conditioned upon y'all go try to figure ways to moderate this, to mitigate some of the harmful effects of the way it was appearing to be so massive and so on. And so the Department of Neighborhood Development Services, looking at the situation, said, you know, we need more time before this comes before council. And I, for one, would like to applaud NDS for taking the initiative to say, let's get this figured out before it comes to council, not after it comes to council. So I'm hopeful that it will come back up at some point in the next few months. Somebody asked me, well, you're not going to just sneak it onto the agenda the Friday before the Monday meeting, are you? And I said, no, we'll follow exactly the same procedure we always have, and it'll be on the agenda that will be released at least 5 days ahead of time. And no, we're not going to do things in the dead of night, and don't worry, we will be respectful of the right of the public to have comment on what is clearly a hot topic. So I just wanted to put that out there. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance concerning the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Authority. And Ms. Marshall, are you in charge of this one?
Yes, Mayor, I am.
Go for it.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of our community. The resolution that's before you all as council is to approve amendments to the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Authority Service Agreement, thereby allowing the city manager to sign a revised document and to formally designate an alternate to the city manager to serve on the Regional Authority Board. Since 1995, our community has partnered in a regional jail authority allowable under Virginia Code Section 53.1-95.2. This authority has created a service agreement that set forth the obligations of the member jurisdictions. The modifications before you, which are shown in a marked document available in the agenda packet to the public starting on page 322, does not create any alterations that would cause a budgetary impact. What happens is that the agreement as it stands uses a per diem charge methodology to tally the city and the county's financial obligations to the regional jail for both debt service and operational costs. Nelson County, a member of our regional jail authority now, previously paid a flat rate for the debt service component. The amended agreement provides for the funding of debt service and operational costs based on each member's proportional usage of the jail, now to include Nelson County. Again, as a practical matter, there is no budgetary impact on the city with this modification. The second update would be to codify the desire of the city manager's office to provide authorization from council for an alternate to attend the Albemarle County Regional Jail, Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Board meetings on behalf of the city manager, and therefore be able to vote on his behalf as well. The update to the service agreement provided an opportunity for council to document the authority of deputy city managers to attend and vote at ACRJ board meetings in the city manager's stead. Are there any additional questions that I maybe could answer for members of council?
I did also want to clarify that in this agreement, additionally, Charlottesville City Council and Albemarle County have a joint position that they alternately appoint. And with Nelson County paying more of a fair share towards the operational costs, that joint position is being asked to be given to Nelson County. Albemarle would still have 4 seats on there. Charlottesville would still have 4 seats on there. And now Nelson would have 3 seats. I just want to make sure I'm very clear about that.
Councilor McGill, is that part of what we're voting on now, or that's a separate?
That's part of the whole changes.
Okay.
That's
That
part of
was
Resolution A.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just want to be very clear out there. I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to sneak something around or anything like that. And I will say that if we are asking a locality to, right now this isn't a problem, but obviously in the future when we are looking at the jail renovations, this will be that Nelson will be probably spending more money now on the facilities. And therefore, it is fair that they have that 3rd seat, at least in my mind. Then I think there's an additional, now I'm very confused. There might be an additional change of that. We could choose to appoint an Albemarle County person to our seat if we chose. Is that? That is not what I'm seeing in here, though.
So, Ms. Marshall, is there any other substantive change that we're making in this?
Not that I recall. I also want to give space and place for COVID brain fog, but not that I recall. Nelson County would gain a seat, and so that would we still would have our, as Councilmember McGill just noted, we still would have our representatives. It was a joint seat that we would be passing on to Nelson County in exchange for them paying in the same methodology that the county and the city currently pay, which is that per diem methodology. And to just be very honest, and it is in documents that the jail has presented, their resident occupancy is going up, ours is going down. So we actually had a decrease in the amount that we are slated in our budget to pay for the jail because we are not putting as many individuals in jail, which is a good thing. That is not necessarily the case for other jurisdictions. So if that helps at all with giving a little bit of additional clarity as to why Nelson may want a seat and why having them at the same methodology of payment may be more appropriate at this particular time than it was when they joined the authority.
Right, and I'm assuming this has all been discussed Councilor McGill at the various ACRJ meetings and so forth?
No, because it's not an ACRJ.
Okay.
This is about the governmental bodies
Okay.
and their commissions.
Okay, well, it makes sense to me. I'm prepared to vote for it.
I just wanted to, it's, because this is a weird commission where it's 3 different governmental bodies. Yeah, usually the boards and commissions, yeah, this is about how the 3 governmental bodies are kind of working together through the board.
Okay.
And I just have one concern that was raised to me earlier this afternoon is just, and this is just a lack of knowledge on my part. I know how Charlottesville and Albemarle look on issues that have come before the board and the board will vote on, the board meaning ACRJ. I'm not that familiar with Nelson County. I'm also not that familiar with the history of how votes have broken down on the ACRJ. And obviously, if you're making even a change in one seat on a board, depending on the dynamics, that can have a significant impact on decisions they make going forward in the future. I haven't had, this was concern raised to me this afternoon, and I haven't had enough time to look into that, but it's making me feel I don't have enough information to know if I have any issue with it or not. So I would plan to abstain, and it very well could be that it's not really an issue at all. It's just me not knowing the dynamics of the board, some of contentious issues that have been before them, and how this may shift the balance of power on the board when it comes to those votes. And that very well, again, that very well may not be an issue. I just don't know enough at this time.
Okay. Any other questions?
Is this a single reading?
Well, this is a one reading. No, I beg your pardon. Yes, this is one reading and is not a public hearing per se. So we have 2 resolutions that have been presented to us. One is to authorize the city manager to approve the new agreement and to authorize the city manager to sign it. The second one, and we'll take a separate vote, is the one about authorizing a deputy city manager to attend and vote in place of the city manager at meetings of the jail board. So first question is, do we wish to approve and authorize the city manager to sign the amended and restated service agreement?
Do we need to open this up for public comment?
It is not a public comment, not a public hearing. So regarding the first resolution, do we have a motion?
I move for approval that we support the reconfiguration of the board.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Ms. Thomas, you take the vote, please.
I believe the motion was stated as the reconfiguration of the board. The resolution in the packet is regarding adopting or authorizing the amended service agreement.
So I'll read the motion. Thank you, Brian. I didn't have it up. I move to approve and authorize the city manager to sign and amend the restated service agreement for the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail Authority.
So that is the motion. Do we have a second for the motion as it has now been stated?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Now, Ms. Thomas, you ready for us?
Councilor McGill?
Yes.
Councilor Payne?
I will abstain.
Councilor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention. Now we need a resolution concerning authorizing the deputy city manager to attend and to vote in place of the city manager at meetings of the jail board. And it's worded to mean any deputy city manager.
Yes, I move the resolution authorizing any deputy city manager to attend and vote in place of the city manager at meetings of the Albemarle County Regional Jail as the alternate for the city manager.
Second?
Any discussion? Ms. Thomas?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
That motion passes 5-0. Resolution authorizing changes to or cancellation of various state-funded transportation projects locally administered by the city of Charlottesville. One reading. Mr. Dawson, is Mr. Dawson with us to make the presentation? There he goes.
I'm here. As you said, well, first, good evening, Mayor and councilors and City of Charlottesville community. As you stated, the title of this resolution is Administration Change of Route 250 Hydraulic Road Turn Lane Extension and the Cancellation of West Main Streetscape, Emmett Street Signal Coordination, also known as Charlottesville Signals, Pedestrian Improvements at Monticello Avenue, Ridge Street, and Preston Grady Avenue intersection improvements. And this is a resolution that's the outcome of our recent work session where we discussed the VDOT portfolio and the management. It essentially transfers the administration of the project of the 250 left turn lane on hydraulic, as well as cancels the other 4 projects listed, including all phases of West Main. To this, I was not going to do the presentation again. I could certainly do that if you'd like or answer any questions, but I just did want to touch on that. While this is called cancellation of those projects, that's in regards to the funding with VDOT. So as discussed, especially some of the safety projects, these are not going away forever. And they're just going away as smart scale projects, with the revenue share project going to be managed by VDOT. So with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if anybody wants to see any slides from the previous presentation or anything like that, happy to provide that.
So, Mr. Dawson, this is exactly what you shared with us in the Planning Commission meeting in terms of the projects that are being shifted around and canceled and
that's correct.
Reconceptualized. Okay, thank you.
Questions, anybody? Now, I was just looking, the memo, the heading talks about canceling the West Main Streetscape phases 1, 2, and 3, but I didn't see that as one of the headings. Oh, there it is, the 4, okay, at the bottom of page 352, I got you. All right, just want to make sure I was seeing it all right. And just to be clear, this is a project, I got asked some questions about it today, and I think I referred to it to use Mr. Sanders' description to say that this project had been on, at best, life support for the last year or so anyway, and he recently got confirmation that because we were not going to be able to move forward this year because of the budget, basically it was off the table for us, for VDOT. So in a sense, this is almost a formality for us to recognize that which has already been made clear to us, and which we have, decisions we have made ourselves over the last few years, but this is just finally pulling the plug on it. Fair to say?
I would agree with that, yes.
All right, so do we have any other questions for Mr. Dawson? If not, can we get a motion?
Yes, I move the resolution authorizing changes to or cancellation of various state-funded transportation projects locally administered by the city of Charlottesville.
Okay, is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, Ms. Thomas?
Counselor McGill?
Yes.
Counselor Payne?
Yes.
Counselor Pinkston?
Yes.
Mayor Snook?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Wade?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0. Next item is the Office of Economic Development update. Mr. Engel, we had originally put you on the 4 o'clock docket, but hey, here we are. I appreciate your willingness to hang in there and follow on late. Take it away.
Sure, what's a few hours? Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's good to be with you here tonight. I'm going to share my screen and walk you through an update. So let's see here. All right, you should be seeing council update, June 6, 2022. So my name is Chris Engel. I'm director of the Office of Economic Development, and I'm joined tonight by two of our fairly recent additions to our staff. And I will introduce them now and call them out as we go through the presentation at various points where it's applicable. But Ayani Wynn Floyd is with us. She started in November of 2021. And George Sandridge, I believe, is on as well. And he started in February this year. But wanted to give a chance for you all to see a face and put a name with a face as we go through this. As I mentioned, it's good to be with you. It's been some time since we've given a general update to the council. So I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights, recent activities, specifically a highlight of our recovery roadmap process, which has been our COVID recovery efforts that you may recall from last year. Also give you some insights into some next steps, what we're envisioning coming out of that plan and moving forward. I'd like to hear your feedback on that. And then final item is a follow-up from an item that came up at your previous meeting where there was a presentation on leases and some questions regarding some of those leases and the role of the Charlottesville Economic Development Authority. So I'll provide a little time at the end to kind of clarify that role and answer any questions you have specifically about that at that point. So with that, we're going to shove off here, and I'd like to start off with this word cloud as it helps express the breadth of our activities in our office here. Office of Economic Development can be, you know, a little like a Swiss Army knife, if you will, a municipal multi-tool for the city. We are involved in a wide array of initiatives, all with the common goal of improving the environment for the business community. Often describe economic development as being a mile wide and an inch deep. So thus you see lots of different words that are all related with a common theme of business typically. But we do find ourselves getting into some unique situations from time to time. And just wanted to kind of start off with that frame of reference. And just a little bit more about us. We have a definition of economic development that we often refer to, and it's not really project-based. It's more of a process and an opportunity to kind of grow community capacity. And so we use this as a touch point. And our mission and vision are listed here on the page as well. And with regard to the mission, I think the key word is catalyst. We try and be a catalyst for good opportunities for improvements in the city. And a little bit about our current FY22 budget, $680,000 for our department, and just to provide a little bit of perspective that barely registers on the scale with regard to the total city budget, but it's less than 1/10% of the total budget. So I mentioned a recovery roadmap. Some of you might recognize this graphic, a little hard to read on your screen at the moment. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we did bring this to the council about this time last year as a proposed recovery effort coming out of COVID, a little uncertain as to the timing, and still frankly are, I guess, to some extent. But we embarked on this with the support of the council and some ARC funds to help support some of these initiatives. We have moved through about 90% of these, and we have a few more to go. This was intended to be a 12 to 18 month plan, so we're once again about 12 months into it, and the intent was to kind of, as we finish up this calendar year, finish these final items here. So just wanted to remind you of that and the fact that we did visit with you all about a year ago, and and walk through this item. It has 4 main buckets, which you can see here: financial assistance, training and resources, infrastructure related items, and then marketing and advertising. And to go into a little more detail on some of those initiatives that are reflected in that recovery roadmap. We've got some items here that I'll hit on. In summary, over the last 18 months, we've had 1,700 applications processed via our office, which typically does not process nearly that many applications, as we were not typically in the grant making business prior to COVID, at least on a scale like this. 3.4 million is about roughly the total amount that has been dispersed through these efforts, and about 700 businesses have been assisted over the various programs. And on the right side of the screen, you can see logos representing some of the programs, and I'll hit on a few of these. The Small Business Relief Grant was the largest vessel for small business relief, and that was funded by the CARES Act, which was the first federal response to COVID. And we had 251 recipients of 2 rounds of SBRG grants that were processed through the last year and a half. The other big one is the BRACE grant, which we've run now 3 cycles of. And that has had over 160 recipients. And we anticipate 1 more cycle of the BRACE grant before we sunset the roadmap in its completion. The Business Equity Fund actually existed. It was started by council in 2018, but upon COVID hitting, we added funds to that, and this is administered through CIC, the Community Investment Collaborative. It's a low interest loan fund for minority businesses. And that was bulked up, and we've got 30 loans currently outstanding that have gone through that program, and that continues to have funds available to relend. It's now a revolving loan, if you will, managed through CIC after screening on by our staff for eligibility requirements. Business Recovery Fund, it was created to recover from COVID. It was created with funds from the city, from the county, and private funds that were donated and collected by CIC. A little over $700,000 were collectively put into that fund, and that has helped about 60 folks as well have benefited from that. That's a low interest loan fund as well. Those funds are also returning and will be used as a revolving loan fund going forward after COVID sunsets. Project Rebound is a regional initiative that had the city and the county and the university, private businesses, was led by the chamber. This was not a granting situation or any type of financial resource, but it was a project that we played a significant role in, and it was helpful to the community. It had masks and cleaner and sanitizer distribution and other things that were helpful to businesses as they were reopening for the first time early on in the first summer of the pandemic. The Charlottesville Housing Relief Fund was new, created solely for the purpose of dispersing funds that the council had set aside in the housing fund, and decided that given the situation, they were better deployed in the form of an immediate relief type of system to folks that were experiencing housing challenges. At that time, our office was tasked with handling that process in conjunction with our job center and Home to Hope staff, which were on board with us at that time. About $1 million went through that process, and those funds have been dispersed completely. So just an example of some of the initiatives and some of the impact that were associated with them. Just to put a few faces and names with some of that impact on the screen, here's a couple of companies, businesses local that benefited from a variety of those. And then a quote or two, funds from the SBRG have been integral to our business surviving, says one business. And another says the curbside pickup spot options have been absolutely essential to our business during this time. So we do follow up with folks, and we get comments from them about the impact. We do share those as we have opportunity. Some ongoing initiatives, in addition to the recovery roadmap. In here, I'll mention Ayani is our Minority Business Development Coordinator. She is handling the Minority Business Program that the city has and is getting up to speed on that. She offered her first round of one of our GO programs, Go Startup, which is for entry-level entrepreneurs. She co-taught that course in April this year, and that was our first back in-person effort with regard to the Go Startup initiative. Like I said, she's spearheading our Minority Business Month planning, which is coming in September. She's working to lead the Minority Business Commission and working with our partners in procurement as it has a sister position that is being filled and getting back up to speed there. So some of the initiatives that Ayani is working on as well. We have continued, albeit at a smaller number, some of our GO programs. Go Hire and Go Cook are two of the notable ones in addition to Go Startup. They have continued with some delay through the pandemic, but are starting to come back with a little bit more intensity in both of those cases. And another item that you may not be as familiar with is another partnership with the county, and it's a buy local initiative represented by a logo down the bottom there of this slide. And we started this on a really quickly, the first holiday season that came around after the start of the pandemic in 2020 as an effort to increase awareness about supporting local businesses and the importance of supporting them and the impact it has on the economy, not only with jobs, but with circulation of income through the community. And it was fairly well received and, like I said, put together very quickly. So we've spent a little bit more time kind of ramping that up through last year in 2021, and we've had a little change in staff levels at both city and county, and it's now coming back online here this month with a little more intensity. And George, I introduced earlier, is the lead on that, along with one of the staff members of the county's Office of Economic Development. And so you'll see and hear more about that. And like I said, it's really an intent to engage and make citizens aware of the importance of local purchases. And that really became an opportunity during the pandemic. People naturally wanted to do that. And this effort just gives them a little bit more encouragement to do it and gives them a little bit more awareness and education on why it's important. We do a bunch of other initiatives in terms of our newsletter. Some of you may receive that. It's bi-monthly. This became more important and more apparent that we needed to regularly do this during the pandemic, as people were initially without information and very much wanting to have regular information fed to them. So we had previously started to kind of sunset newsletters as being old hat and moved on to social media, but the pandemic allowed us to change course on that, and we're now back in the habit of a bi-weekly newsletter that has relevant information for city businesses for them to digest easily. We do continue to have social media presence where we push information out as well. Let's see here. All right. I provided a copy of our annual report on the dais for you this evening in hard copy. In the off chance that you had not had a chance to see one, we do very few hard copies. It's primarily issued via our website and through our annual report with a link to folks. Folks who are viewing this at home and have the presentation, this image is hot linked, so it should take you directly to it. But you can also find it, like I said, on our website under reports. This is our most recent annual report. We do one annually based on the calendar year and published in about February of every year. So more details on the most recent year can be found inside this report. We'd encourage you to take a look through it when you have a chance. In that document, the centerfold, if you will, has this image, and it's worth pulling out and just spending a few minutes just to kind of highlight one of the key elements from last year in terms of major developments and impacts happening in the city. And this aerial looking west in downtown here highlights significant developments, 4 significant developments of Class A office space reflected in the numbers 2 through 5. Number 1 is the Quirk Hotel over on the left side, and that was finished previously and is not part of Class A office space, obviously. But the other 4 are significant additions to the market with regard to office space, and you can see them clustered around the downtown. It's fairly unprecedented in terms of the sheer volume. 500,000 square feet, just to give you a little perspective, is a quarter of the Empire State Building, which at one point was the premier and largest office building in the United States and perhaps even the world. But in any case, these 4 buildings are now all open and serving members of the business community in various capacities. They're not all 100% occupied. They are nearly 100% leased. There is a difference there, and the difference does matter in terms of the impact that our downtown and our service industry sees by virtue of remote work versus in the office type settings. So we are hopeful that these become 100% occupied as well as 100% leased. They're well on their way to being 100% leased, and we hope that the occupancy on a daily basis follows along shortly thereafter. But suffice it to say that this will not be in our next annual report, because this type of addition to our environment in terms of Class A space is unlikely to happen again, probably ever, but certainly not in the near term, as this space gets absorbed and the shadow space that was vacated by some of the tenants moving also becomes absorbed. And just some of the numbers that we look at here as we start to wrap up. Capital investment has been significant in the last decade. This shows 10 years worth. And if you were to total up all these bars, you get to $1.75 billion over 10 years of total investment across all sectors. So that's residential, commercial, and institutional. The one that we focus on most significantly is commercial. And that's what you saw on the previous slide in those 4 projects. They would have been in the gray bars. In the orange bars. But our average over those 10 years for commercial is about $80 million on average a year, which is pretty significant for a city of our size. We all know we are a small city, 10 square miles in total. And most of that 10 square miles is spoken for with residential or roads or parks or things of that nature. A very small percentage of the actual city is in a zoning or a land use that can be occupied by commercial space of any sort. So having a fairly consistent level of investment across a 10-year period in commercial space, I think is fairly significant. And I wanted to point that out to you all this evening. A couple of the other numbers we look at, and we looked at much more significantly as part of our revenue team during COVID, our sales, meals, and lodging tax. And this graphic shows sales tax, which was frankly our most resilient of the 3 kind of discretionary income items. If you look closely at this, you certainly see a dip in the gray colors in March, April of FY20, but it rebounds pretty well and is now tracking above even last year and all previous years for the most part on average. So fairly resilient in the sales tax area, which is good news for the city revenues. The more stable they are, the easier it is to budget and project and plan for things. The next one is meals tax, which was a little more volatile and is still kind of coming back in line with what we might expect. I heard a presentation that suggested about 20% of Virginia restaurants closed during the pandemic. I would expect that we don't have a specific figure on that for the city, but I would expect we were probably somewhere close to that. Food service was certainly impacted significantly. And to my previous comment about office workers, they create the demand for service industry, food service being key to that, a key element of that. And so we're keeping a sharp eye on when remote work returns to more in office, so that we have a sense of what that demand is going to be to potentially regain some of the lost businesses and or support some of the ones that are currently still struggling, looking for that demand to return to levels that they were accustomed to seeing previously. So nobody really has answers on that. If you talk to 10 economists, they'll tell you 10 different things. We're just trying to keep tabs on that locally as we continue to move out of the pandemic. Lodging tax is the other larger discretionary item. You heard from the Visitors Bureau folks earlier in the meeting, and they handle all the outbound marketing that helps drive this, but it is a key element of both the city and county's budget. A portion of that goes to fund the Bureau, but a larger portion stays within the city general fund to support activities that the city wishes to support. You can see a pretty significant drop off here in FY20 as well, but that has come back. It took a little while, didn't come back very well in 21, but the high blue line there is 22, and it is up to levels that we have mostly not seen before. So it is moving definitely in the right direction there. So with that, I wanted to show you our org chart just to give you a sense of our size and where we are. And much like this organization and others, we've experienced some transition of late. Last year, we lost 3 staff members that equated to about 25 years of experience. And that's difficult to replace on the fly. And certainly in this environment where employees in general are harder to find across almost all sectors, and certainly local government is experiencing that. I mentioned that we have hired the Minority Business Development Coordinator position as well as the Business Development Coordinator position, and those are represented by Ayani and George here tonight. And they are learning their positions, they are learning the community and engaging and getting up to speed every day. We are attempting to hire a Workforce Development Program Manager, and that's indicated in the middle of this diagram in the vacant position. We did attempt to hire that last year in the late summer, and we were unsuccessful. So we held off a little bit. We've reposted that and that is closing now, and we'll be evaluating those applicants and hoping to fill that position. We're in the process of combining the Job Center Coordinator position that you see down here in the red areas. 2 of those positions have been vacant for some time, and demand has changed in such a way that it did not make sense to immediately refill those. The one position that is in our job center, the Job Center Coordinator there, has been doing dual role of managing, supervising the Home to Hope peer navigators that were previously part of the Office of Economic Development, but have transitioned over to the Equity and Diversity and Inclusion Office under Deputy City Manager Ashley Marshall. And this position, the Job Center Coordinator position, we're moving start of the fiscal year as well. They will be occupying a renovated physical space, and given the overlap in duties, we felt it made good sense just to go ahead and move the reporting line item there and have the Job Center Coordinator as well as the Home to Hope folks report to that office. So that's a move in progress. Hasn't happened yet, but we will anticipate that at the start of the fiscal year, which is just around the corner. So that's a quick overview of the staff. I haven't mentioned much about parking tonight, but we do have the only person in the city organization that has parking in their title is the parking manager, and that falls in our portfolio. Won't spend a great deal of time on it tonight, but the parking manager oversees about 1,700 off-street parking spaces that constitute our entire city public parking program. And, so moving on to some next steps. As I mentioned, the recovery roadmap is a 12 to 18 month plan. There's a few elements left on that that will get us through the end of this calendar year. I mentioned that we are rebuilding in terms of staff and capacity. And we intend to continue to do that. One of the first conversations I had with Mr. Rogers upon his arrival was he asked a question about strategic planning and what's our plan look like, and when was the last time it was updated, et cetera. And made us think a little bit, and certainly believe the timing is right for a number of reasons. But we have not had a outside kind of third-party objective analysis of economic development opportunities / strategy for the city in my time here, and I've been with the city 17 years now. We've done some internal work. We had a strategic plan that we update internally years ago through a process that was created through our P3 mechanism, which is somewhat dormant at the moment, but we had kind of in-house strategic planning consultant type activities that created our current plan, and then our staff has worked annually to make updates to that plan, but that's been a number of years that we've been repeating that process. I think we all would agree that it's probably time to have a consultant come in and give us a full environmental scan, data analysis, best practice review, kind of compare us to peer cities in Virginia and elsewhere in terms of what they're doing with their economic development programs, have them gain a full understanding of the environment in terms of we are a small city of 10 square miles with much of our land mass tied up in other activities, and have some recommendations, some strategies and goals suggested by a consultant. So that is what we're thinking is a key next step as we wrap up the recovery roadmap and start to think about the next year, if you will. I think the goal would be to create a 5-year plan that we could embark upon in 2023. And there will be a few steps, obviously, along the way to get there. Obviously, procurement role there, and scoping out the work and getting somebody on board, and then a process of data analysis, stakeholder engagement, focus group surveys, et cetera. And then, a plan development piece that would involve our staff and others from the community. So that's what we see as a next step with regard to creating a new 5-year plan. And I think that's about the last slide that I had. So questions or feedback about anything here, and I do want to make sure to answer the CETA lease-related questions before we end. So I'll pause. Any questions?
Councilors, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a few. Thank you, Mr. Engel. Appreciated that very comprehensive update. One question I have. Wow, it's late. Sorry. First question I have has to do with when do you think this consultant will be engaged in a 5-year plan put together? The sort of the last piece on your last slide. Is that a 6-month from now kind of thing, or a year?
Yeah. At this point, we've done nothing but talk about it and decide that it's probably a good idea. I've researched a couple other peer cities and figured out who's providing these type of services currently. started to develop a list and started to think about a scope of work. But we have some internal work to kind of flesh that out, get our procurement folks to get that polished up and put out for responses. That all takes a little while, unfortunately, longer than we would all hope typically. But 60 or 90 days there, and then the work would need to begin, and it's likely a 6-month process. So I think we're looking at calendar year 2023 before this becomes real, and is something that we can follow up on and pursue and use as our guide.
Great. The second question I had was the GO programs that you described. Is there any connection with the Network to Work program up at PVCC? Are there any interconnections with that program and your work? Do you all coordinate it all, or is there some sort of integrated plan for the community with that respect?
Yes, we're well aware of Network to Work. In fact, the GO programs originated out of a city council work session 8 or 9 years ago that was led and had participation by Ridge Schuyler, the founder of Network to Work and a dean at Piedmont currently. And the city evolved its GO programs, and Network to Work has evolved into a tool that's being implemented actually throughout the state now. They have an app behind them. They use a particular methodology of investing in the community and creating navigators and community touch points to get people connected to the right resources to get them jobs. So Network to Work didn't exist when we started all this. They are now up, fully functioning, and like I said, growing. They have a state grant to grow throughout the state. Our folks just went over as part of an orientation for a couple of our new members to understand the process, went over to the Network to Work offices, had some time with them. We engage and refer businesses that are looking for employees to our job center coordinator, as well as Network to Work. They're both viable resources in the community, and we do coordinate with them and use them as needed and refer them regularly.
Great, thank you. And then the last question I had was around I guess it's CEDA, Charlottesville Economic Development Authority. Is that something you were going to present on at a different time?
Not specifically, but I'm happy to answer the question. I sent some follow-up information, just some basic information. It was a large packet.
Okay.
I apologize for that. On the history of the Economic Development Authority. Okay. The city has had an Economic Development Authority for 50 years and used it for a variety of purposes. The lease question that came up the last time when you had the presentation from Ms. Kelly on city leases was around 2 of the leases that are run through the Economic Development Authority.
Okay.
And I may as well go ahead and just kind of hit on that at this moment. But EDAs are established in the state code. Most municipalities have an EDA, and they're used for a variety of purposes. But one of those primary purposes is to buy, sell, manage real estate. And years ago, when the city came into ownership of the former National Ground Intelligence Center, they decided to use the mechanism of the EDA to manage that process. So that it was easier and it didn't kind of tie up city council time, if you will, with the nuts and bolts of a lease and managing the long-term lease. So that methodology was used, whereby the city leased it to the EDA, the EDA leased it to the ultimate end tenant, which was previously SNL Financial, now S&P Global, excuse me. So in any case, that process has been used now twice in recent years. The other one is the Pavilion, whereby the city leases it to the EDA then leases it to the operator of the Pavilion. And these are very detailed lease documents. They're 30, 35-year in length, so they're long lease agreements. And so I guess the good news is to the question from last time about these leases is that they are both city assets. The city owns the underlying land and the building. In the case of the office building, and in the case of the Pavilion, the structure above it. And they're
Hey, Chris, we don't have to go into beginning of time for the authority.
Very well then. Sorry to get too into the weeds, but in any case, they're both generating positive economic activity on behalf of the city. And at the end of those lease terms, the city will have opportunity to continue with another tenant or do something different. But that's the status with those.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Anybody else?
I'll try to be quick, but I have a few questions. When it comes to that workforce development program manager position, do you have any kind of timeline of roughly when it would be expected a person would be able to fill that role?
Yeah, we just completed the listing period, so we're receiving the applicants this week. So we'll review those, and provided we have some interested folks that seem to meet the qualifications, we'll start the interview process. So it could be as early as 6 weeks to 8 weeks. But I would have said that about a year ago when we started the process, and the candidate pool was small then, and we did engage in some interviews, but ultimately we're not seeing what we felt we needed for that position, so ultimately did not make any offers with that round.
Given the turnover, particularly in that position, but also others that you mentioned throughout the Office of Economic Development, has our minority business program as well as the GO program, have either of them seen their services scaled back over the past years, or were there planned expansions or things they had in the work that had to be put on pause?
Well, with the GO programs, yes. We just simply can't offer those programs without somebody capable of leading them. Now, this also coincided with the pandemic, which changed the way people are interested in getting training and the way we could train, obviously, with the separation and social distancing requirements. Those were very difficult to do. And frankly, what we have seen, and we're still a little befuddled about this, is a lack of interest, or a much, much lower level of interest in training in general. And, lots of folks are seeing this, employers are raising wages and still having trouble, getting qualified candidates to fill positions across all the entire spectrum of employment opportunities. So we've seen fewer interested folks for training programs. And of course, we have a staffing issue where we simply can't run some of the programs that we would have liked to have run if we had no interruption in staff. So a couple of factors playing in there. With regard to the minority business program, the gap in service there was much less, and Ayani has picked that up pretty well and is getting up to speed. As I mentioned, she offered the Go Startup program first time since she's been on board in April. And that was our first time back in person with that program, and it seemed to go pretty well. We expect to repeat that one in the fall.
Okay, and then last question. Does our Economic Development Authority have bonding ability?
It does. Bonding ability. It does industrial revenue bonds, which is allowed by statute, and that they're kind of a misnomer in the way they're named now, but they are intended for supporting industry. And basically, what the EDA does is provide a tax exempt status for the bonds, which ultimately creates a lower rate for the recipient, and lower interest rate for the recipient, usually by a basis point or two, which is why folks want to do them. So the state enabling legislation that allows it for industrial qualifications as well as nonprofit. So in Charlottesville, in the last 2 decades, we have done almost exclusively nonprofit. So Live Arts is an example. The Martha Jefferson House is an example. The UVA Foundation is an example. And so those bonds have those are intended to go through an economic development authority. So yes, we do that. If it's anything housing related, if an entity has a housing authority, that is the appropriate situation. And I think the housing authority actually had a bond issuance that's very similar to what I just described on the housing side with the Midway Manor folks just a month or two ago, if I recall. Yes, we do have industrial revenue bond authority.
Okay, and then just some final thoughts. I have been very concerned just with the turnover about ensuring that particularly the GO program and our minority business program don't lose momentum. I know there had been a lot of conversations about potentially scaling those up and having them almost be part of a strategy of community wealth building that's looking at them in conjunction with not just expanding those programs, but how that could connect with things like HUD Section 3, the redevelopment of public housing, other things going on in the city as part of a coordinated strategy for having people who live in the community actually be able to benefit from wealth creation. I just really don't want to lose momentum on that with the turnover that there's been. And following our conversation last meeting about the leases, it made me think, what could it look like for us to have a strategy for land acquisition as part of our economic development strategy? I'm glad to see, thinking about a long-term plan. And I don't think we should be afraid to maybe think bigger picture about what is something beyond just one residential or business development look like that could be more transformative in terms of land acquisition and just long-term strategic planning. Finally, just off the top of my head, I've wondered, you've got Ix Art Park, you've got the area by the Rivanna River, managed by the Rivanna River Company, which is now holding a concert series and other public events. And the S&P building, which in either 10 or 20 years the city will own outright. What would it look like for us to start developing plans for those spaces now to really have them be transformative places in our community, the same way that the Ting Pavilion is a transformative public space. So I look forward to getting more into the weeds on that as that process for doing the 5-year plan gets underway. So thank you.
I do have a basic question about how do we as a city benefit from having an economic development authority versus as a separate entity?
It just essentially, it's a tool whereby it's designed to do the real estate and the industrial revenue bonds as it's stipulated in the state code. And it's, something that most localities choose to activate. They don't have to, but they typically do. And it just makes it a little easier to do things on behalf of a locality through the EDA, and the council doesn't have to tie up their time and energy with it on a daily basis and let the EDA do that. The EDA board is appointed by the council. It's a 7-member board, and our office provides the staff to that entity and connects our programs, in lockstep with the EDA, and what we give them updates similar to what we're doing with you all tonight.
Anybody else?
Well, so do they do like the real estate management then?
I mean, we handle that in-house. I mean, the board doesn't do that, but they get updates on it, and they understand when they get oriented. They understand the history, go into the deep history with them so that they understand that. But they're not involved in day to day now.
And does their bonding capacity affect our bonding capacity? Or do they become a separate entity that doesn't affect?
Yes, unless there was, yes, they're connected. I think is the answer. I'm not an expert on bonding. We have bond counsel that we would refer that kind of question to, that serves the EDA as needed when bond issuances come up. It's a very specialized kind of area of law. So we would probably want to check that answer with them, but yeah, our resources are the city's resources. So we were essentially the same unless we were to have other resources that we came across that we could use as collateral for some type of bond issuance.
Chris, I can jump in there for just a second. So CETA does not count against our capacity at all. At one point in time when we were there was a bank qualification limit. Any debt that CETA issued counted against the city's ability to get bank qualified limits on debt, but it's essentially treated separately.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a list somewhere of the obligations that are against CETA?
Yes, yeah, we have an entire list of all the industrial revenue bonds that have been that are current, and then we have the history if you're interested in that as well.
Yeah, I would be, please. And then, so the way that works then is that you sort of go to bat for an entity that wants to exercise this option of the tax exempt bond, but they're the ones paying
Yes.
it back, I suppose. Yes.
That's correct. The EDA is simply a conduit.
Got it.
For the tax exempt status. Yes.
Okay. I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So one thing I just wanted to note, and I'm intrigued by the notion of the consultant and the plan for a five-year plan, because this year when we had the code building, Apex Energy, 323 Garrett all coming online the same time, the same year. That amounts to about $2 million more in taxes, in property taxes for the city starting in 2023. And I think we have to understand, again, a part of the need to be a city and not merely a town, that part of what a city has to do sometimes is to be very conscious and intentional about finding ways to get some kind of economic activity other than simply being a bedroom community to the university. That if we are going to rely on something other than property taxes on homes, we have to have some primary economic activity going on. And one of the things that I would really like to see is to have us make a plan to be intentional about how we're going to bring more jobs, how we're going to bring what kind of jobs, what kinds of qualifications for those jobs, and so on, so that we're doing it on purpose, so that we hopefully have a better chance of getting what we want and not merely what somebody else decides to plunk down here. So I look forward to that study.
Yep, I just want to chime in to say that kind of with my day job, I work with Chris and his staff on a regular basis, sometimes daily, but definitely weekly, and I just love the spirit of collaboration that he and his staff has. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Any other councilor comments? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So that is the last item on our regular agenda. Are there any other business items for consideration? Or councilors, do you have any questions you want the city management to follow up on? Hearing none, then the last item is that we are now at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers, again, have 3 minutes to speak if you wish to. You may join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar, by pressing *9 if you have joined by phone, or by standing in line behind the microphone in council chamber. We'll alternate between in-person and virtual speakers. Is there anyone who is here who would like to speak? Mr. Sales, having waited here patiently for 3.5 hours, 3+ hours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Sells. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Authority. First, I want to give a compliment to James Frias from NDS. He's great to work with. He's solution-oriented, which is a welcome change. I do second the need for an inspector. We did have to pay a third-party inspector to come do 4 site visits, and it was a total of $7,000, which was $7,000 we didn't have in our budget. But if there's no inspector on the city staff, we will continue to do that until the projects are completed. I also wanted to talk about the economic development. Councilor Payne, you mentioned Section 3. That is something that the Housing Authority is definitely invested in. We have a new Section 3 policy that requires all contracts that are signed by Housing Authority have a Section 3 component. So they're either providing job training, job opportunities, or assisting businesses with startup, like a startup business. And so we currently have some residents, over 40 residents are looking for jobs in the construction field. A lot of them don't have enough experience to get a job as a carpenter. So we do need the GO training to get back up and running. We did have, I think, a class of 10 or 11 initially, but due to COVID, that changed things. And after that graduating class ended, we did not start a new class. We lost Holly Lee, which was a vital part of keeping that program up and going. And so we really do need it. We currently have $40 million of construction underway and plan to start another project that's $40 million in the fourth quarter of 2022. There's a 5% requirement that the jobs or businesses that are Section 3 benefit from that $40 million, 5% of that $40 million. But if we don't have the folks that are ready for those opportunities or businesses ready to be created, that money will easily go out the door. And so onto that, a challenge that I think the city needs to take up is creating a Section 3 policy around its own contracts. So the Belmont Bridge was created, it's being funded. It may not be city money in it, state money or federal money that requires Section 3, but why not have the community in Charlottesville benefit from that project? Jobs, contractors, equipment. We have a hauling company that's getting ready to start their business up, is a West Haven community member. So that's something I think the city should look into. You can mirror off our policy. We can talk about it. You all do have a requirement for Section 3 based upon CDBG and home, but you all receive such small dollar amounts, it doesn't have a big drop in the bucket. The affordable housing piece, I'll touch on it really quickly. That's my main job anyway. We do need more units. We're releasing 270 vouchers within the next 2 to 3 months, and releasing the vouchers, if there's no housing to rent up, then the vouchers are useless. So that is something that I think the city needs to take a look at through the SGP process, maybe requiring that more affordable units are available at the voucher rent limits, because that language currently is not there. And then also doing something about the projects that receive funding, requiring that maybe that their rents are low enough to rent with the voucher. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Sales. So to alternate, is there anybody online who wishes to speak to council at this point?
Yes, Mayor Snook, our first speaker will be Robin Hoffman. Robin, you're back on with council.
Oh, I didn't even know I was going to be back on, but that's fine. I just wanted to, I guess, say I appreciate everything you guys are doing, that there's a whole lot of stuff to do, and that COVID has really sort of kicked everybody, into a place where it's very difficult to get things done if you don't have enough staff and this and that. But I think that, like I said, there are people in Richmond. The mayor was talking on the news tonight. There are people in different cities, New York, for instance, who are banding together. And I think that maybe one of you can take it on to find out how people are disarming people. It can be done, and certainly arms can be limited to single shot guns or whatever, or rifles. But certainly the military guns need to be taken off the streets. There's, people for the last 10 years have been antisocial or not being able to be social, either on Facebook or, whatever has caused that. But right now, especially, people have absolutely no way of understanding, the world except for what they see on video games. I mean, so we really need to take charge. We need to have leaders who will focus on taking off these weapons and finding out how they get there in the first place. And of course, the open gun shows and all that sort of stuff. Thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Now back to in person. Anybody wish to speak?
As much as I would love to, I will pass for tonight. I know, no performance tonight.
Is there anybody else online then who would like to speak?
Yes, our next raised hand will be Joy Johnson. Joy, you are back on with council.
Hello, my name is Joy Johnson, and once again, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier in the first part about please, there needs to be another glance or conversation from council looking at what is happening to affordable rental units. And when Mr. Sales speak about the projects that we're doing, we are doing, when I say we, I'm talking about FAR, CRHA, and our other partner in this. We're putting together deeply affordable housing, not just affordable housing, but deeply affordable. And when you have a tax credit building such as Mallside, who have accepted quite a few of the city mainstream vouchers and the city vouchers, who has now gone up on their rents, what's going to happen is that even though you're trying to put funds into the vouchers, it's going to be useless because people can't afford it. Right now, Parks Edge is expensive. People are calling every day trying to find somewhere else or moving because they can't afford it. So there has to be some kind of immediate attention looking at what's happening with rental units that are probably getting subsidy from the city. And the other question I just have for all five of you is, every night we, every first and third Monday, we sacrifice ourselves to tune in, listen to council, and to voice our opinion. But it's getting very annoying that when we put our thoughts out there, we don't get any reaction from any of you at the next meeting or even during this meeting. I think that's a little disrespectful. Maybe y'all need to talk about how do you respond to comments that come here. We want to feel like we're being heard. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
We have one more raised hand at the moment. Susan Cruz, you are on with City Council.
Of the Community Climate Collaborative, also known as C3, and a longtime resident of Charlottesville. Sorry for coming so late in the meeting. I was unable to be here earlier for public comment. Just wanted to touch on a couple of items that were on the agenda tonight. First, I really wanted to talk about the carbon offsets that the Charlottesville Gas is purchasing, and I'm really concerned about exactly what those look like. Carbon offsets industry-wide are really generally something that is considered to be a last resort after all other attempts to reduce emissions are made. And I'm concerned about what future greenhouse gas emission inventories are going to look like with those carbon offsets baked in, making it look like our emissions are doing better than they actually are to the community. And they're also something that's widely growing in concern as not being valid ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We really need to take a hard look at what those offsets are. And as Chris Meyer mentioned, where possible, we should be looking at directly offsetting emissions right here in the community, because then that is a lot more guaranteed to be certain that we're doing our part to reduce emissions overall. So very concerned about that. I'm also concerned related to gas and transit, what the alternative fuel study might mean as we are look for the Charlottesville transit system, as we are looking at the future of the gas utility and the future of fuel prices. And I'm just wanting to be attention to that. We still have not seen a full scope of what that study is going to look like, though very grateful to the climate team who sent over the scope for the climate addendum. We are working with CAT to try to get the scope for what that fuel study looks like. Wanted to thank Councilor Payne for his comments on the transit vision, really wanting to encourage the look at bus driver pay and how we're sort of planning for the workforce that is going to deliver that transit vision. I think that is a really good perspective that we need to hear. Also, Vice Mayor Wade's comments about adequate public input. C3 did a transit equity study a year ago with several focus groups, directly, including focus groups all in Spanish, focus groups that included all members of the Black community. And these are just really important measures that need to be taken when we're seeking community input and should be more of a norm rather than an exception. Also appreciate Vice Mayor Wade's comments about looking at different fuel types or vehicle types for the vision of the future. It doesn't all have to be giant buses that require bus drivers. We can be looking at micro transit and on-demand services and really want a full picture of that transit study. Also, finally, just want to welcome the new members of the Economic Development team. Our Corporate Sustainability Director had a good interaction with George over there in the office. So looking forward to working with that team in the future as well. So thanks for all your work, and I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz.
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Well, then there being nothing further to be done, we're adjourned. Thank you all for coming. If anybody's still watching, thank you for watching.